Kicking off the list at number 10, Darkclaw. Coming from the Amalgam universe, where DC and Marvel combine powers figuratively and literally, we get a Wolverine-Batman double whammy. First appearing in Legends of the Darkclaw issue 1 back in 1996, at just age 5, young Logan Wayne witnessed the death of his parents, so now we have that Batman origin right off the bat to lay the foundation. Good stuff, always promising. And then Logan Wayne was sent to live with his uncle in Canada. But after poachers ambushed his home, we have even more family members biting the bullet. So far, so sad. Okay, so Logan Wayne enlisted then in the Royal Canadian Air Force and soon after the Weapon X program. This is all starting to sound a bit familiar, I bet. That's when the Wolverine origin comes in. Logan Wayne got the adamantium treatment, but it was a failure. In a way, kind of. Because Logan wasn't this mindless brute like he was in the comics. See, now he kept his sanity. So now we're starting to get more of a positive vibe, which is good for a good start of this list. Afterwards, he was a free man, so he studied criminology, forensics, gymnastics, martial arts, anything he could get his hands on, including the 127 major styles of combat. That mixed with the claws, Logan Wayne is somebody I'd never want to cross paths with, either as Batman or just Wolverine. Either way, I'm like, no, you guys are both gonna kill me. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, support our man Wolverine. He is Canadian, we are Canadian, only makes sense. Really hit those thumbs up. You guys are the best. Let's get back to the list. Number 9, Wild Thing. For this one, we go over to the MC2 universe where Elektra married Wolverine and soon after came a child, of course. That daughter was named Rena Logan, and if that name doesn't ring a bell, she's also called Wild Thing. Marvel's MC2 imprint quickly gained momentum after What If issue 105, which introduced us to a universe full of other super kids. Wild Thing's powers are very similar to her father's, obviously. I mean, even just by looking at her, you could probably make a guess who she's an offspring of. All that aggression, you're like, okay, it's definitely Wolverine. She also possesses the power of regenerative healing and super strength, but what makes her stand out really is the psychic claws. Instead of adamantium claws, she has minor psionic abilities that allow her to manifest her own claws, but if she focuses hard enough, if she really thinks, she can have claws, real life claws like her father, and dish out physical damage too. Mental, physical, she's got you beat in both realms. Number 8, Hydra Wolverine. Hearing Cap say "Hail Hydra" in Endgame was a wild moment to witness in theaters. Steve using future knowledge to save the day instead of kicking everybody's ass in the elevator, whilst tipping his hat to comic book fans. It was a nice moment, beautifully written in. In Exiles issue 92, we get to see Logan turn sides briefly as well. In this reality, Wolverine is a Hydra agent and the Invisible Woman is Madam Hydra. And to make things even more strange, they're both lovers. Yeah, this odd couple here alongside Slaymaster left their reality after fighting the Exiles, and they tried to conquer the multiverse. Hydra Wolvie wasn't around too long, for he was actually brutally taken out by the Cat with his own claws in New Exiles issue 12. Number 6, Earth X. Also known as Earth 9997, this version of Iron Man hit the pages back in Earth X issue 0. This time around, the human race is at risk due to the release of Terrigen mists. So Tony decides, you know what, I'm just gonna isolate myself, not being sure how the mist would react, which is a fair point. So in turn, he would wear his armor all the time, then eventually he made an Iron Manor in New York. Super cautious, you know, with today's stuff going on, you can't really blame him. He went even further when he decided it was best to create his own team, the Iron Avengers. This guy was super paranoid. So eventually Galactus did come along, so Tony used his Iron Manor and distracted the Celestials beforehand. Now during this, Tony lost his life. Some wreckage impaled him, and for the first time in a while, Tony was able to breathe open air. How, you ask? Well, he died, and his soul immediately went to the realm of the dead, and that's when Captain Marvel's soul recruited him for an army set to take on death. Which is, first of all, nuts, because even after you die in Marvel Comics, you can't just chill out in heaven. You have to like go fight another war immediately, like come on. But Death did eventually die, and that's when Tony got another huge upgrade in Paradise. Using the High Evolutionary's devices, Tony was changed into this angelic being, of course, still with wings. And he looked like Iron Man, so that's fun. You can customize your own angel outfit once you get up there. That's good to know. Number 5, Tony Doom. Since What If is currently dropping weekly episodes on Disney+, we have to mention one of the more wild issues. What if Tony Stark had become Dr. Doom? It would probably be pretty bad. Yeah, yes it is. So here in the storyline that both of them go to the same college instead of Reed Richards being Victor's roommate. So now it's Tony. Two geniuses in one dorm. Sounds like they would make dreams come true, but in reality it was a living nightmare waiting to happen. Doom tricked Tony into switching bodies Freaky Friday style. And on top of that, Tony's memories were also wiped. So Tony, in Doom's body, gets in heat for the experiment, and in turn, he gets sent back to Latveria. Meanwhile, Doom is in line to take over Stark Industries. He still is Tony Stark, so down the road, Doom Industries was now a competitor to Stark Industries. He's brilliant in any way. The pair end up creating their own armors. Of course, Tony builds a red and gold Doom armor, while Doom makes a green and gray Iron Man armor. I'll give you a second to absorb that. There we go. It's a fun little swap with good action, but it's a little bit too confusing of a Freaky Friday type plot. But it's worth a shot. Go give it a try. Number 4. Dead Man Walking. We look now over to Fantastic Four: The End, released in 2007. Most of Tony's story here was the same, but during the Mutant Wars, Tony lost his life. Now, he didn't get redirected to a paradise where he would then become an Iron Man themed angel. Instead, he uploaded his subconsciousness into an AI. So now he lives through his armors, just swapping back and forth, walking around, which sounds like a solution, I guess, but living forever? Come on, Tony, I don't think that's a way to go, really. Number 3. Primal Wolverine. A side we don't get to see too often is Logan's animalistic side. Although maybe it's for the best, we don't want to see that. We don't want any of that smoke, really. Coming from the Mutant X series back in 1998, we pick up with Wolverine, Sabretooth, and Wildchild, but this time around they're referred to as the Pack. Now in this story, Logan still goes crazy after Weapon X does their thing, but this time he's not alone. Sabretooth and Wildchild also endure these crazy experiments, each of them also going primal in the end. Now the three of them end up roaming the Canadian wilderness like an actual pack. But this pack is one you want to avoid. They end up going nuts by the end of the comic, like I said, but while they're in the wild, they did see other mutants, and in turn they all worked together for a hot moment to figure out what was happening in Weapon X. They have the right idea, but those animalistic impulses are just too powerful. Messy. Number 2. Old Man Logan. Mark Millar's Old Man Logan begins in volume 3 of Wolverine on issue 66, and this is a future where supervillains have sadly won for the most part. Hulk and She-Hulk had kids, the Hulklings, who would beat the crap out of you if you didn't pay rent. So yeah, it's an odd future to say the least. Everybody has their own territory, so Logan now has to pay up for living in his. Hawkeye, who was much older and this time around he was blind, needed Logan's assistance to get across the country and deliver a secret package. This was a way Logan could get some of that rent money, so let's do it. Just talking about Logan paying rent money is a weird thing. When they get back from their trip, things have changed drastically. Now Hulk Gang actually took out Logan's family because, you know, they were bored. And that's what people do when they're bored in this dark future. No more games, no more talking. Now it's time for Logan just to get payback. Simple as that. Alternate reality, same temper. Logan gets Banner, he gets him right through the chest, so naturally he hulks out. And then when Hulk eats Logan, you think that would for sure be the end of it, but that's when Logan pops out from inside Banner. Surprise, we're gonna throw up. And finally, number 1. Old Man Venom. Coming from Edge of Venomverse issue 4, we see Logan get captured by Angel, who is Archangel in disguise, and Hulk Jr. This story played out differently than the Old Man Logan storyline because this Wolverine told Bruce Banner Jr. what happened to his father. Archangel took Logan to the danger room of the X-Mansion, and that's where he and Bruce Jr. just ambushed him. Wasn't very happy this time around, although the first one wasn't really happy in any way, I guess, either. Bruce Jr. had this idea that maybe if he kills Logan, he can then use his DNA and create symbiote hybrid clones, but what ended up happening was Logan fought a Venomsaurus Rex, that same T-Rex from the original Old Man Logan storyline. The same one we see chasing Hawkeye and Logan. So he fought it, got eaten by it, and then considering the fact that Logan was eaten by the Hulk and ripped his way out, we already know that this is gonna be much better. He comes out better than ever. The symbiote ends up bonding with Logan in the T-Rex tummy, giving us a pretty exciting extreme upgrade. He rips his way through the dinosaur and subsequently rips his way through his enemies. Guys, those were 10 weird alternate versions of Wolverine. Thank you so much for watching, but before you go, please feel free to drop us some comments down below. What are some lists that you'd love to see in the near future? Who deserves the spotlight right now? Tell us all below. Tell us all your secrets. Tell us everything. I've been your host, Taylor McWaters. Keep being you, and we'll see you next time on Top 10 Nerd. Peace. Kicking off the list at number 10, Spider's Man. We'll kick off this list on an itchy note. This version of Spider-Man from Earth 11580 is actually Spider's Man. You might be asking, wait a minute Taylor, spiders? Like more than one? Oh yeah, he's actually made up of thousands of spiders that work together as if they're one person, like a hive mind. See, before that incident, that horrible incident, Peter and Gwen were visiting Horizon Labs, and instead of one spider taking a bite out of Peter's finger and then blessing him with biceps and perfect vision, he instead fell into a pit of radioactive spiders where they all consumed him, and subsequently his consciousness was spread out through all of those spiders. Hive mind, so gross. How horrible is this already? If I just got robbed and Spider-Man came to save the day, I'd be sick. Just seeing a cover of this guy on Spider-Geddon issue 3 makes me so uncomfortable. I mean, hats off to Christos Gage and George Molina for making this character one of the most unique versions. You can definitely say that. Definitely unique. The Spider. Coming from Earth 15, the Spider, also known as Inmate 24739, made his first appearance in Exiles issue 12. Inmate, what's going on with that? Is Peter bad in this reality? Yeah, he's actually pretty horrible. He's a redhead who has a lot in common with Cletus Cassidy, and in turn he gets slapped with 67 consecutive life sentences by a jury. He's not as into the saving lives thing, he's rather into the opposite. He joined Weapon X after being drafted by the Timebreakers. Now, as horrible as the Spider sounds, he still feels like Peter when you read this comic. He has a similar sense of humor as Deadpool here, so it's still fun, although he's evil. Hyperion of Earth 4023 also joined, became the leader, and the Spider stood by his side as they planned on conquering multiple realities. Pete met his fate in issue 44 of Exiles when Firestar hit him with a Mega Blast. He turned into ash. Already cremated, look at that, we get to save money. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, that would be awesome. It really does help our nerd squad over here in our nerd base. You guys are the best. Thanks for sticking around. Let's keep going with this list. Number 8, Spider-Kid. Making his first appearance in Spider-Force issue 1, Earth 218 Peter's childhood is actually darker this time around, believe it or not. See, both of his parents passed away in a car crash, and Uncle Ben was a mean old man afterwards who was just horrible to Peter all the time. Peter actually changed his name to Charlie, and then he didn't try and be good. He actually became quite a troubled young man. He had to spend 2 years at the Administration for Child Services and then 2 more years at the Horizon Juvenile Detention Center. In order to get by, he chose to steal money from street dealers. He's not a bad kid, although I've just said that he is a few times. He just had a horrible childhood and he slipped down the wrong path. It happens. But that all changed when Charlie was recruited into the Superior Spider Army by Ashley Barton. She calls him Grandpa because he reminds her of an older Pete from her reality. He's like, yeah, I'm 13 though, please don't call me Gramps. Awesome. Number 7, Captain Logan. Coming from the Noir series, Earth 90214, Jim Logan was a detective, much like our 616 Logan. His past was also troubled. His partner was his half-brother named Dog Logan, who has the brains of a bedbug and the manners of a gutter rat. And that's in his words, not mine. His origins are a little bit messy when it comes to the Noir verse, because in X-Men Noir, Mark of Cain, Wolverine's origins are that of a bootlegger whose past is never really touched on. All we know is that he's a former lover of Jean Grey, and that he was the one who took out Scott Summers' left eye. But here in Wolverine Noir, he's a detective with a gritty Catholic past. Either way, the Noir versions of Wolverine is quite dark, and although his claws aren't built in this time around, he still has them as a weapon of choice. Real Freddy Krueger style, I like it. Number 6, Weapon X. One of the more extreme versions of Wolverine, Weapon X came from the Age of Apocalypse storyline, and the first time we meet him is in X-Men Alpha issue 1. Weapon X was a member of the X-Men, only this time around Magneto is running the team. How lovely is that? He's great. One of the most notable differences between this Logan and others is that Weapon X is missing a hand. He had battled Cyclops, and although he lost it in the fight, Logan can still use claws on that arm. Now in this reality, Weapon X was married to Jean Grey, so a little light in this warped reality. Love still exists out there, it's true. He later on became Weapon Omega, aka the heir to Apocalypse, so it's really not that great. There's love, but there's also evil stuff. Number 5, Zombie Wolverine. We're just a day out from another episode of What If on Disney Plus, and we're all so excited, and I'll be honest, a little bit nervous because those zombie Avengers are still superpowered and they're still on the way. Zombie Wolverine first appeared in Ultimate Fantastic Four issue 22. Now at the Xavier Institute, Wolverine and the X-Men were taken on a zombified Alpha Flight when Magneto came in to save the day. He was part of the crew that went to fight off the remaining horde, but I did introduce him as Zombie Wolverine, so yes, he was sadly infected. Wolverine was bitten by Zombie Hawkeye and Zombie Cap, and after he turned into one himself, he defeated and then ate the Silver Surfer. An afternoon snack quickly gave Wolverine cosmic powers, quite the upgrade. It's a gory good time. If we had X-Men in the MCU right now, the zombie episodes would have been so much better, but we can't complain, it's still good stuff. Wolverine is a main character in the Marvel Zombies Dead Days and a minor antagonist in Marvel Zombies vs. Army of Darkness. If you haven't read either, I recommend you read both of them. Read all the zombie comics. I shouldn't have to sell you on how cool zombie superhero comics are. You know? Number 4, Mr. Murder Hands. There's a nickname, a rather fitting one, really. Logan from Earth 65 first appeared in Spider-Gwen Volume 2, Issue 20. He was a former Japanese samurai who was cursed by a witch. The curse was that you have to live on Earth for all the days that his targets, the people that he killed, would have. So he's gonna see quite a few days, basically. His memory here is also erased, and it happens right after he joins the Weapon X program, where he's also given his trademark adamantium claws. When he later joins S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Black Ops team, his fellow operatives give him the nickname of Mr. Murderhands. Nice. Oh, this is your teammate, Edward Murderhands. Yeah, make sure you sign in. Great, break a like, team. Number 3, Superior Spider. Starting in 2013, this version is the outcome of the Dying Wish storyline when Dr. Octavius planted his mind inside Peter Parker's. Nice little swap. There we go. We see this begin in Amazing Spider-Man issue 698. Peter gets a priority call from the Avengers, and when he meets them all on the raft, Cap informs him that one of his old enemies is dying, and Peter knows that it's Doc Ock before he even tells him. Cap says that he's asking for him. Well, rather, he's asking for Peter Parker. Peter goes in and he asks everybody for a private moment, just the two of them to talk it out, right? But when they're in there for that hot second, it's revealed that they somehow have switched bodies, page 20 and 22. So Peter in Doc's body is freaking out. He's worried what the hell to do, because now he's got his powers and his families and his friends are all at risk. You gotta stay away from those brain-swapping Octobots, that's the key. I'm not gonna tell you what happens because it's really enjoyable. Go check it out yourself. Number 2, Spider-Boy. Marvel and DC are powerhouses, both on page and on screen. So when the two companies combine forces, we get some pretty amazing characters like Spider-Boy. Making his first debut in Marvel vs. DC issue 3, residing on Earth 9602, Spider-Boy is an amalgam of Spider-Man and Superboy. How epic is that? Spider-Boy is a clone. Now he's a clone of Peter who was created during an accidental lab explosion. General Ross felt responsible for this explosion, so he ended up adopting the young lab lad. They were a fun duo until Ross was taken out by a mugger. So Pete then became a hero. He put together the suit, became famous almost overnight. That whole event kicked off the with great power comes great responsibility vibe. Now back when he returned to Project Cadmus, Pete was given a web pistol to help him swing around town. In this story, he doesn't have webs here, but it doesn't really matter. Because of his new superpowers, he can focus gravity inwards to make himself stronger and move faster, or he can lower gravity around himself in order to jump higher, further, and faster. He just clicks the off switch on gravity and then climbs walls. Must be nice. Guy probably kills it with wall sits. And finally, number 1, Flash, Betty, and John. For the last one on this list, we figured we'd end on a 3-in-1. What If is releasing weekly episodes on Disney Plus currently, so I have to throw it back to one of my favorite issues from Volume 1 back in the 70s. What if someone else besides Spider-Man had been bitten by the radioactive spider? Written by Don Glutt, What If Volume 1 Issue 7, we get to see Flash Thompson, Betty Brant, and John Jameson get their shot at being Spider-Man. How lucky. First, Flash gets bit, he gets the powers, and he teaches a bad driver a lesson. With his new strength, I mean, he's a little bit too harsh. The middle finger always works, but okay, rocky start, that's fine. Then he decides to take a crack at professional wrestling. He thinks it's going to be a breeze, but due to said super strength, he killed the guy instead of tapping him out. Not much of a superhero there. The Vulture ends up ending his not so hot streak, so next up we have Betty Brant. Her costume is arguably the flashiest. It makes for great photo shoots, apparently. Gotta get those likes somehow, make those superpowered TikToks, I'm here for it. But when she runs out of web fluid while striking a pose, the thief that takes Uncle Ben's life runs on by, and no one does anything about it. And finally, this issue shows us John Jameson getting his shot. While his outfit was also pretty on point, his judgment was not. John tried to stop a space shuttle from crashing and didn't live to tell the tale. Next time you feel like web swinging to work, just remember that the responsibility thing is just as important as the powers.
And at 10, Poison. Poisons are a species of crystalline extraterrestrials spawned by the Poison Queen. Originating on Earth 17952, the Poison spends an unknown amount of time as prey for larger, stronger creatures before discovering that they could assimilate symbiotes and their hosts to become more powerful. Poison Captain Marvel was the Poison who assimilated venomized Captain Marvel of Earth 81622. Poison Captain Marvel attacked D-Man and Rage on Manhattan Bridge alongside Poison Killer Thrill, Poison Hyperion, Poison Gamora, and Poison Thing in order to attract more powerful heroes. Kind of a burn. This attack led to the creation of Poison D-Man, Poison Rage, and Poison Thor. However, this poison most likely died along with the others when the Queen was killed by the time-displaced Jean Grey. And at 9, Imposter. Part of a training program with the intent of eventually replacing Earth's heroes, this Skrull was permanently turned into a copy of the Kree warrior Mar-Vell, to avoid any possible detection. However, a problem emerged when the real Mar-Vell died. So this Skrull was no longer useful in the training program, and he couldn't really return to his true form, preventing him from returning to his normal life. However, he wasn't just going to lie down and die, so the Skrull allied himself with two other Skrulls in the same situation, posing as the deceased heroes of John Proudstar and Adam Warlock. After some time, they had a run-in with Kitty Pryde, who they mistook for her Skrull imposter and then took prisoner. But realizing that she was the real deal and that Galactus was about to arrive, they let her go and joined forces with her and Wolverine in an attempt to save their people and the X-Men. The Skrull was ultimately gunned down by another Skrull when he attempted to stop a Skrull general from keeping people from getting on board a spaceship, I'm guessing to evacuate. And it ate Rogue. When Rogue touched Ms. Marvel to absorb her powers, Carol grabbed onto her arm and didn't let go. So in addition to Carol's Kree DNA glitching up Rogue's powers, the prolonged contact caused each to end up absorbing the powers, memories, and personality of the others. They kinda swapped places. Rogue sought out Professor X's help, and afterwards she was sent to space as a consequence of an encounter with Brood. Rogue and Carol Danvers were briefly visited by Carol's counterpart from the Prime Marvel Universe using the powers of the Reality Stone, since the gem links her to the other wielders of the gem in other realities and they can all kinda like communicate, with the wielder of this Earth being Anna Marie. They talked about the differences between their lines before the visiting Carol was pulled to Earth 70875. But yeah, Rogue having Carol Danvers' powers. That's actually pretty weird.
Coming to you live from Warp World, one of the most out there versions of Peter Parker hit the page in Infinity Wars issue 3. Moon Knight and Spider-Man are gearing up. They're making a game plan to take down Gamora. And Spider-Man says, look, just punch whoever I punch in a second. Deal? Easy peasy. That turns out to be a lot harder than imagined when the both of them merge together. Alongside Arachnite, we got to meet some other amalgams of characters. We got Ghost Panther, Soldier Supreme, Iron Hammer, and more, so much more. Peter's mind was also separated into 4 different personalities, each desiring dominance. So we have Science Pete, the Knight Pete, Friendly Neighborhood Arachnid Pete, and for when it comes to signing checks and shaking hands, we have CEO Pete. Number 6, Astro Spider. Jumping on over to Earth 3145, making his first appearance in Spider-Force issue 2, John Jameson III was an astronaut for NASA, and during one mission, a spider got trapped in his suit, which it's an absolute nightmare scenario right there. But when the space shuttle was hit by cosmic waves, John then obtained these amazing new abilities. He didn't come home and stop bank robbers one quip and whip at a time. See, this Earth was now destroyed by a thermonuclear war, so Jameson was assigned to oversee the construction of a spacecraft on the Nautilus platform. He, along with 35 others, are the last of humanity. After this cosmic mishap, John can now read minds. He can create webs of solid telekinetic energy, but he met his fate a few issues later when he was feasted on by Verna. Sometimes being a spider totem sucks. Number 5, the Savage Spider-Man. Spider-Man, but a savage, so savage. This Peter Parker entered comics in Vault of Spiders issue 1. When a plane went down over Antarctica, Peter was the only survivor out of his family. He didn't have powers yet, he didn't swing his way to freedom, but he survived by using the last parachute. During his rough emergency landing, the wind moved him around quite a bit, and unfortunately he landed in one of the worst places on the planet, a spider's nest in Savage Land. I was just done with the spider stuff, now we're back to being itchy again. They all just bit him over and over and over again, and powers of course soon followed. The Savage Spider-Man was the new protector of Savage Land. Later on, he was recruited into the Spider Army by Ghost Spider to fight off the Inheritors back on our Earth 616. Honestly, this is a great version. I love when Wilson Fisk sees the boy growing up again. See, he was the reason the plane went down in the first place those many years ago. So when he returns to see if this Savage Spider-Man is real, he gets a little payback. Number 4, Hostess Cake Spider-Man. I think it's time we talk about one of the weirdest but yummiest versions of Spider-Man. Not only is Peter dishing out quips and flips, but he's also feeding the world too. What a hero. This version was born in an ad for Hostess Twinkies, so naturally its own Marvel Universe has to exist. And also, it's fun to make it exist and to think about it. When it came down to taking on villains, Spider-Man wouldn't web them up, instead he would just huck treats at them, because that always works. Twinkies, Hostess cakes, anything, you name it. Funny enough, in Spider-Verse issue 1, the cakes are referred to as golden sponge cakes so that they don't get sued. It's also the same issue where we see the end of Golden Sponge Cake Spidey. It's sad, but if he stuck around for too long, realistically everybody would just get fat or riddled with cavities.
Spider sense tells me this cake isn't for eating. It's for throwing!
Getting close to the end, and in number 3, MCU Captain Marvel. Carol Danvers is depicted as a former US Air Force fighter pilot who was given superhuman abilities when a lightspeed engine test went wrong, and she was exposed to the cosmic energy of the Tesseract and subsequently transformed into a human-Kree hybrid known as Veers via blood transfusion. In 1995, on the Kree Empire's capital planet of Hala, Danvers, then known as Vers, suffered from amnesia and recurring nightmares involving an older woman, particularly as a former Air Force test pilot who acquired cosmic energy force powers from the Tesseract after an explosion that wiped her memory. So, you can kinda see where that was going. But I'm including this version of Captain Marvel not because she's weird, but because for some reason everyone seemingly hates this version. So much so that when I mentioned how the MCU Captain Marvel could beat the MCU Hulk since MCU Thanos beat him and she was going to beat MCU Thanos if he didn't have the Power Stone at least, everyone still got mad at me. And some still hate me to this day. You should have seen my DMs after that video went out. And still, sometimes I get messages about how some of these fans hate me, okay? All because of my literal second video on the channel. And that's the reason I included this, so I can finally say my piece. Redemption is finally mine! Penultimately, in at number 2, Marvel. Marvel is the Captain Marvel of the Marvel Ultimate Earth, Earth 1610. For millennia, an ancient extraterrestrial race called the Kree have tracked and studied a mysterious planet-eating creature they called Galactus. Sounds like a Skyrim shout. The Supreme Intelligence restricted this knowledge to specially trained high-level Kree, fearing that if the true nature of Galactus became common knowledge, it would drive their race insane. Several years before Galactus was due to arrive in the Sol system, the Kree staged a covert observation mission on Earth, and Plus Commander Marvel underwent massive nanosurgery to appear human, going undercover as physicist Dr. Philip Lawson to investigate the human race. Growing fond of humans, Vel joined S.H.I.E.L.D.'s ACES program to speed up humanity's progress of the stars, helping to develop a zero-point energy source for manned spaceflight. On the day that the ACES-01 test article was going to be launched, the base was attacked by a Kree killform with orders for Vel to aid humanities no further. Refusing, Vel just obliterated the killform, but the effort left him powerless and he was captured by S.H.I.E.L.D. After questioning by General Nick Fury and Captain Carol Danvers, Vel briefed them, the Fantastic Four, Iron Man, and Thor regarding the existence of Galactus and, kind of updated them on the whole situation. Finally, in at number 1, Actor Marvel. The man who would one day be known as the Captain was an ordinary but slightly stupid human from Brooklyn. He spent his life frequenting bars and getting into fights. As a child, his alcoholic mother hung his teddy bear from a noose, so yeah, that would kind of mess you up. However, after gaining his powers and joining the anti-traitor group known as Next Wave, the Captain would want to change his name. While looking into using the name of Captain Marvel, he actually found out about someone totally different from the Captain Marvel of Earth 616 that we know. Instead, he learned about an adult film star who was using that name. Yes, you heard me right. When trying to use the name of Captain Marvel, the Captain came across an adult film actor who was using this name. And honestly, I think that's probably one of the funniest versions of this character that there is. I don't care if it's not Carol Danvers or Marvel, but it's someone going by the name of Captain Marvel making adult movies. Okay, and that's gonna be a number 1 spot for me, hands down. Technically, there is an Earth where all the Marvel characters are adult stars. And the MCU is just one big adult film franchise, which I guess would make the Avengers movies giant.
Starting off our list with an honorable mention at number 10, we have Captain Carter. Normally, I'd put my girl Peggy higher up on any list, but since she's less weird and more awesome, we've gotta put her here. Captain Carter actually originally debuted in the Marvel Puzzle Quest video game during a celebration for Captain America's 75th anniversary, but was given a fully fleshed out backstory and has been a fan favorite ever since. In a universe where Steve Rogers is assassinated before he can be given the super soldier serum, Peggy Carter is instead the one who becomes an incredibly strong and iconic hero for the Allied forces. The comics would continue her adventures, with her universe's New York City coming under attack with nuclear weapons by the Red Skull, and eventually lead to her joining the superhero team the Exiles after their multiverse-spanning adventures brought them into contact. Next up on our list is the center point for one of the most controversial Marvel storylines of all time, the infamous Hydra Cap. Initially appearing to be the main Marvel Universe's Captain America, this version of Steve Rogers had grown up indoctrinated by Hydra's fascist ideologies and was actually sent to America to kill the creator of the superhuman serum for the Axis powers, but instead wound up deceiving his way into receiving the serum himself. Having wound up in the main Marvel Universe when their Steve Rogers was rejuvenated back to his usual age in a different storyline, this Hydra Cap was able to hide his evil intentions until the pivotal moment that he declared to the world those shocking words, "Hail Hydra." Seeing one of comics' most inspiring icons twisted in such a way was definitely unexpected, and definitely earns a surprising spot on this list. Coming in at number 8, we have the blood-sucking Vampire Cap. In a universe where Captain America fought and then lost against the villain Baron Blood, soon the entire Avengers team was overtaken by his vampiric disease. Consumed with a lust for both blood and power, this Steve Rogers began a year-long killing spree that culminated in killing Baron Blood and taking his place as the new Vampire King. This version had all of the benefits of the Super Soldier Serum, in addition to new vampire abilities such as healing so advanced, he was able to survive getting decapitated when facing off against several other Marvel heroes. I guess going for the head isn't as effective as we all thought.
And at 7, Phyla-Vell. After Genis-Vell, then known as Captain Marvel, previously destroyed and recreated the universe, the new version was subtly altered with Phyla-Vell's existence being one of the changes. Phyla-Vell was the second artificially created offspring of Captain Mar-Vell, who was created by her mother Elysius in the new universe because her first attempt, Genis-Vell, had been so successful. She fought her brother, who was insane at the time, and in the process of helping to restore his sanity, she then tried to claim the Captain Marvel title, though her brother refused to give it up. To save Rick Jones' girlfriend Marlo Chandler, Genis had to travel to the future to see what would be the cause of her future demise. He asked Phyla to stay behind on Earth to keep watch over Marlo, and in doing so she encountered the being known as Magus, who tried to kidnap Marlo. She and the telepath Moondragon foiled the plot, and Genis returned to Earth shortly after, telling her that he stopped a villainous plan to release Magus hundreds of years in the future, but wouldn't explain how. But like, bro, I just fought him, couldn't you have done that a little sooner? And at 6, AI Avengers. This android-based Captain Marvel was one of the many robotic versions of the Avengers created by Raz Malhotra, which were in turn inspired by Egghead and his AI Avengers. They were dispatched to fight off the Hulk and the forces of Hydra at the Mount, but were ultimately destroyed. But I mean, like, come on. An AI version of Captain Marvel is pretty weird, but honestly, based on what I talk about on Top 10 Gaming, it's par for the course for me. Halfway through into number 5, Genis-Vell. After a falling out with Captain America, Rick Jones found himself mentally drawn to a pair of extraterrestrial golden bracelets, the Nega Bands. Donning the bands, Rick slammed his wrists together with all of his might, and his atoms traded places with those of the exiled Kree Captain Mar-Vell. Joined together, Rick and Captain Marvel lived a shared existence. During the epic Kree-Skrull War, Rick and Captain Marvel became pawns of the Kree Supreme Intelligence, who unleashed the untapped psionic potential of Rick's mind, the Destiny Force, to put an end to the war. Sometime later though, as a result of the exposure to deadly nerve gas, Captain Mar-Vell perished from incurable systemic cancer. As Rick slowly began to move on with his life, eventually getting married, Mar-Vell's love, Elysius, felt more alone than ever. Using Titanian science, Elysius sampled some of Mar-Vell's genetic structure to conceive a child, Genis. To protect him from Captain Mar-Vell's enemies, Genis was artificially aged to maturity and taken to an isolated world where he would be safe from harm. Upon discovering of his true lineage though, Genis donned wristlets modeled after the Negabands worn by his father and was determined to carry on his father's heroic tradition, eventually calling himself Captain Marvel. And at 4, William Mar-Vell. William Mar-Vell, also known as Billy Mar-Vell, was the combination of both versions of Captain Marvel from both DC and Marvel in the shared amalgam Earth. This version of the character shares the powers of both Captain Marvel and Shazam from the DC universe, since originally Shazam was named Captain Marvel. This version of the character was also a member of the Judgment League Avengers and first appeared in JLX #1 from 1996. On this Earth 9602, he's actually a young boy who, when shouts the word Kree, transforms into a super scientifically enhanced adult hero. His fellow members of the Judgment League Avengers are not aware of the secret though. After Angel Hawk, Canary, and Goliath found Super Soldier, Captain Marvel soon joined and formed the Judgment League Avengers. He was then transported by Doctor Strange Fate with other members of the Judgment League to battle Thanos. When Mariner was accused of blowing up oil freighters, the US government branded him an eco-terrorist, and Captain Marvel and other non-Metamutant members of the JLA captured him and imprisoned him without a trial. So, kind of a little wishy-washy on the whole morals thing.
Coming in at number 3, we're back in the world of animal puns with Croctor Strange. That's right, Loki isn't the only magical hero with an alligator alter ego. Hailing from the same reality as the meme-worthy Spectacular Spider-Man, Croctor Strange is an anthropomorphic crocodile who learned his magic from a being known as the Rancid One and often clashes with the pig-themed Dormammu. And if that's not punny enough for you, this version of Strange is also a member of the Unhumanati instead of the Illuminati, which also features a mouse-themed version of Iron Man. Ooh, and I thought they said Disney taking over wouldn't have any weird side effects. Coming in at number 2, we have a wild combination with the DC Universe with Doctor Strange Fate. During the Marvel vs. DC miniseries of comics, an alternate reality known as Amalgam Comics was born, featuring combinations of iconic DC and Marvel heroes put into one body. One of the most notable of all of these crazy combinations was the being known as Doctor Strange Fate, a three-way mix-up between Dr. Stephen Strange, Dr. Charles Xavier, and the DC hero Dr. Fate. Man, this guy's got more PhDs than a diploma factory. With all of these magical, telepathic, and reality-warping powers combined, Doctor Strange Fate was incredibly powerful, but one of the weirdest aspects of the character was the fact that he knew he was just a temporary creation of a crossover event, and thus spent much of his time attempting to find a way to keep his reality ongoing. How very meta of you, Doctor Strange Fate. And finally, coming in at our top spot is the only Doctor Strange variant with feathers, we have Ductor Strange. Hailing from the same weird world as Howard the Duck, aka Earth 791,021, you might be wondering why a duck-themed version of Doctor Strange is labeled as weirder than a crocodile-themed one. And that is because this Ductor Strange is also a drunk. Studying under the ancient wino, this Strange's version of communicating with spirits is literally drinking spirits, although he does still possess enough magical energy to be able to transport himself and various other duck-themed heroes to different dimensions, including the mainstream Marvel universe. Just maybe lay off the booze a little bit, I'm not sure how well birds can handle their liquor.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Grey Hulk. One of the more badass versions of the Hulk was also the earliest. See, originally Stan Lee wanted the Hulk to be grey, but ink problems made him green. The Incredible Hulk made his first smashing appearance in 1962 when a teenager Rick Jones was about to be caught up in a gamma bomb test. Scientist Bruce Banner ran out and threw him to safety, but in doing so he himself was caught in said explosion, and in turn he was irradiated with radioactive particles, becoming the Grey Hulk. Our green guy, the main 616 Hulk, is referred to as the Savage Hulk, and Grey Hulk is said to be weaker. They made him an entirely different version in the comics to help explain the color change. They were both fighting to control Bruce. Things get spicy during Peter David's run when we meet Joe Fixit, this mobster Grey Hulk working at a casino. Imagine this guy asking you for your ID. I would bring 5 pieces and a passport, just to be safe. So intimidating. And his hat too, like he looks friendly, but he also looks like when he shakes your hand, he's gonna break all your knuckles. Number 9, Skulk. Coming to life in Doctor Strange Fate issue 1 back in 1996, Marvel's Bruce Banner combined with DC's Solomon Grundy. How fun. Another grey version, but a little more out there this time around. Solomon appeared right before Bruce Banner was caught in that gamma bomb explosion, so now the two ended up fusing together, creating Skulk. Skulk was taught by Doctor Strange Fate that in order to remain in human form, you need the assistance of magic. Black Widow's palm dances will not work in this universe, my friend. So Banner was like, alright, I'll work for you, just make sure I don't become that awful pale monster. Deal? Deal. Great, awesome. Skulk's last comic was in Lobo the Duck issue 1 just a year later. He died in the destruction caused by the Gold Kidney Lady. Yes, you heard me correctly. And before we list off some other fun versions of the Hulk, if you want to skulk smash that like button, that would be lovely. Those clicks really do help us out a lot here. You all rock. Now let's keep this list going. Number 8, Peter Parker. Looking now to the 2006 bullet point storyline, if you haven't already guessed from the title, this one's a superhero swap. We love those. Now this is a life where Uncle Ben, well, still died, but he died a lot earlier, so unfortunately he wasn't around to mentor Peter. Give him the whole with great power comes great responsibility rundown. So now Peter's stealing Jeeps, he's blasting Green Day and flipping off the elderly, just the complete opposite guy that we know and love. During the Jeep joyride, it ran out of gas, so Sneaky Pete went off to look for some more to help fill up. Now while he was searching, that's when he just happened to stumble across that gamma bomb test, and he didn't realize that he had this Hulk side to him until later on that night. His friends got in trouble, so they blamed Peter, and that's when he got really angry, and then he turned into the Hulk for the first time. It was nuts. Aunt May straight up had a heart attack. More than fair. After this point, retired Steve Rogers came back, suited up as Iron Man, and then began hunting him down. This universe is crazy. Peter Hulk killed Steve Rogers, and he didn't go down until Galactus arrived on Earth. Not a bad run.
Coming in at number 7, we have the powerless Dr. Stephen Strange. In issue number 40 of the first volume of Marvel's original What If comics, we got to see an alternate reality where Baron Mordo wound up becoming the Sorcerer Supreme. And while most of the story would focus on Mordo's misadventures in the role, Doctor Strange's role in it is definitely unique to say the least. When Stephen Strange showed up on the Ancient One's doorstep wondering if there was any possibility the mystic arts could heal his hands, the Ancient One simply taught him some anxiety-decreasing meditation, and then sent him on his way, making Strange believe that it was all some sort of yoga retreat. This version of Strange would go on to merely become a peaceful professor at a medical school, which, compared to the Sorcerer Supreme's usual lifestyle, is definitely a little bit, well, strange. Coming in at number 6, we have Strange Supreme from the first season of the Disney Plus show, What If? In an alternate timeline where instead of losing his hands in a car accident, Stephen Strange instead has to endure the loss of the love of his life, Dr. Christine Palmer. Desperate to bring her back, Strange trains in the mystic arts, but finds himself drawn to much darker powers as he realizes that Christine's death is a fixed point in this timeline, and it would take an incredible amount of magical power to undo it. Turning to the dark side and becoming Strange Supreme, Strange absorbs centuries worth of magical beings before finally absorbing even his own better self. Tragically, even when he does have enough power to save Christine, she is disgusted at the monster he's become to save her, leaving him alone as the entire universe collapses around him. Coming in at number 5, we have the elderly Doctor Strange from Earth 982. An alternate universe that mainly focused on potential children of Marvel heroes and the next generation of crime fighters, Earth 982, or MC2 as it's more commonly known, is also home to one of the most unique versions of Doctor Strange, because instead of his traditional salt and pepper look, this Stephen Strange has gone full Gandalf the White. Having long since retired from the position of Sorcerer Supreme, an elderly Strange is called back into action as a master of the mystic arts when the new wielder of the role, Doc Magus, begins to tamper with darker powers. And while Strange would need help from the younger generation of heroes, this grizzled but still magical sorcerer is definitely one of the coolest looking versions of the character. Coming in at number 4, we have Doctor Strange of the year 1602 from the Marvel series of the same name. In this offshoot of the multiverse where many of Marvel's classic heroes were now born during the era of the 17th century, Dr. Stephen Strange was an advisor to the first Queen Elizabeth, and the right-hand man to the monarchy when it came to all matters relating to magic. This old-timey take on the character would be weird enough on its own, but gets extra bizarre when you consider that this version of Strange was eventually executed by the monarchy for treason, but continued to give guidance to this Earth's heroes as a ghost from the afterlife. Talk about not retiring when your time is up, am I right? At number 3, we've got another character with a Dragon Ball Z style fusion in the form of Clark Kent, the Super Soldier. And no, this didn't suddenly switch over to a DC Comics themed video. In the Amalgam universe, where the Marvel and DC multiverses have been compressed and combined into one unified world by the megaversal beings known as the Brothers, Super Soldier is the result of mixing the backstories of both Captain America and Superman. Clark Kent is a young man from Kansas who winds up receiving his powers of strength, heat vision, and flight not from being a Kryptonian, but by volunteering for the Super Soldier program to help America during the Second World War, a process which is spied on by a very mischievous Jimmy Olsen. He would go on to fight the leader of Hydra, a version of Lex Luthor, and Super Metallo, a combination of Metallo and Red Skull's usual brand of killer robots. Double the trouble, double the fun. Coming in at number 2, we've got a version of Captain America that doesn't even need America. That's right, it's Captain Avalon. Coming from a Marvel universe inspired by classic sword and sorcery fantasy, this version of Cap is merely called Stevan until his son, funnily enough named Stevan Jr., is kidnapped by the Dreadlord, an evil alternate version of Baron Zemo. While he doesn't appear to have any actual magical abilities or equivalents to the Super Soldier formula, Captain Avalon is a brave knight at the peak of human condition, and his red and blue shield still brings the core of this classic character to light, even if America doesn't really exist in this Game of Thrones style world. And finally, coming in at the top spot for our weirdest alternate versions of Captain America, we have a choice that's not even human. That's right, it's Captain Americat. Hailing from Earth 8311, the very same world that's home to the spectacular Spider-Ham, this version of Cap is named Stephen Mouser, leads a group of superpowered animals known as the Scavengers, and in another groan-inducing animal pun, most notably led them into battle against the supervillain Moltron. While his appearances have mostly been related to side stories compared to Spider-Ham's main adventures, Captain Americat is definitely the oddest version of Steve Rogers that we've yet to see in the Marvel multiverse.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Anthony the Vampire. Making his first appearance in Ultimate Avengers issue 14, Anthony was the greatest vampire hunter who ever walked this earth. He trained Daredevil, Blade, and Edward Cullen. Okay, the last one I lied about, but still, you get it. When he meets up with Blade later on, he has a new look. He was eventually bitten by a vampire, so he became their leader as well. The coolest part about Anthony is that he uses a Mark I Iron Man suit to get around during the day, so the sun doesn't, evaporate him or whatever. He captured and turned Smart Hulk into a bloodsucker, but his armor was stolen and used by Stick to fight back. Another Tony, another suit. Imagine you're in trouble and this guy rolls up on you. What a surprise that would be. Issue 16 of Ultimate Avengers opens with a great Twilight parody, but this is also the last time we see this Iron Man take flight. And that's because Hulk punched his head off, and usually when he does that, you don't come back, vampire or not. Number 9, Iron Lantern. From the Amalgam comic universe, Iron Lantern is of course a millionaire who is in charge of Stark Aircraft. While he's working on a flight simulator, it straight up took off and flew him somewhere else. Best simulator ever, if I do say so myself. Then he crash landed on the ground, injuring Stark, and he realized he was brought to a crashed alien spaceship. That spaceship belonged to none other than Roman Sir, who died before getting a chance to talk to Hal Stark. Not being in the best condition, obviously, after the rocky landing, Hal started working with his newfound tech on a new suit, hopefully to save his life. The Green Lantern upgrade of his suit saved his life for sure, but it also gave him the power to create anything out of green energy. He used a battery that reminded him of a lantern to do so. And then he went on to fight the aliens that had shot down Roman Sir and continued fighting enemies such as Madame Sapphire and Mandranesto, who, yes, you already know exactly what I'm talking about. Before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, that would be great. It really helps us out here quite a bit. You're the best. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get right back into this list of weird Iron Mans. Number 8, Lord Iron. Coming from Marvel 1602, Lord Iron was amongst the other heroes who rose to fame, but a little bit back in time. See, Captain America was literally shot back in time, so the Age of Heroes has to begin there. And in turn, we get some fun versions of our Avengers. Anthony Stark was taken and held captive in the Holy Land during the English and Spanish War, a little different than the cave that he ended up with in our time. He was forced to make weapons still for them for weeks, mirroring Tony's origin in a fun, older way. David Banner was torturing him this time around though, so Anthony makes his own suit powered by lightning bottles. Okay. Now it doesn't matter which timeline Tony ends up in, he's destined to be Iron Man one way or another. Number 7. Iron Man Noir. Coming from the Noir series, Iron Man of Earth 90214 had to go all the way to Atlantis to fix his heart problem. What am I talking about? Let's find out. Tony in this reality was an industrialist adventurer. It feels like National Treasure almost. We meet Tony and the crew and they're looking for something called the Jade Mask. This mask that was said to cure any kind of ailment, so he figured, hey, it's worth a shot to fix the old ticker. It didn't work, so some traitors then revealed themselves once the mask was found, so Tony and Rhodey escaped and returned to New York. He goes on yet another treasure hunt with Rhodey, this time to Atlantis, because he heard a rumor that this power source could also do wonders to his heart, maybe, perhaps. Tony gets the trident and again, he gets betrayed. Zemo and his forces were strong enough to kidnap Pepper, and Tony and Rhodes need a new plan. They travel to Zemo's castle, and it's then that it's revealed that Zemo is actually Tony's father, brainwashed by Strucker. And he was also equipped with Iron Man suits because action and adventure. As far as noir storylines go, Iron Man isn't my favorite, but the whole Nathan Drake vibe that Tony has is still quite fun. And also, Atlantis. It's kind of weird. Dive in.
At number 7, we have Ultimate Captain America, a character that probably wasn't intended to be read as weird when first created, but has since turned out to be a bit more of a unique interpretation of the character. Notably more destructive, assertive, and just a bit grumpier than most other interpretations of Steve Rogers, he could be seen as a different interpretation of American patriotism than more classical versions of the character take from. In another wild and tragic twist, this Cap's version of Red Skull is actually his literal son, the result of his last night with his World War II era girlfriend, Gail Richards. Completely unknown about by Steve and born after he was frozen in ice, the baby was taken by the military and grew up in foster care. Growing up with an inferiority complex, this child would eventually scar himself and become the criminal mastermind, the Red Skull. Talk about a messed up family, Steve. Coming in at number 6, it's Steve Rogers. No wait, it's Stephen Strange. No wait again, it's actually Steven Rogers, Soldier Supreme. In a pocket dimension known as Warp World, where every soul of the Marvel Universe has been merged with that of another, Doctor Strange and Captain America were DNA digivolved into the combined form of the Soldier Supreme. In this unique part of the multiverse, the superhuman experiments done by the Allies during World War II were achieved through magic instead of science, with the weak and scrawny Steven Rogers being taught the ways of dark magic and learning powerful sorcery. With a best friend known as Bucky Wong, a literal Winter Soldier after he becomes a ghost, this combo of characters is definitely a standout in a multiverse full of standouts. At number 5, we've got the alternate future showstopper of Danielle Cage, the Captain America of the future. The grown-up child of both Jessica Jones and Luke Cage on Earth 15061, Danielle has taken up the mantle of Captain America in a Manhattan where climate change makes flooding incredibly frequent and gangs roam the streets. With her own arch nemesis in the form of the Golden Skull, Danielle Cage is also one of the physically strongest Captain Americas throughout the multiverse, inheriting both the strength-based power sets of her parents and letting her yeet that red and blue shield as hard as it's ever been thrown before. Coming in at number 4, we've got a bit of a change of rank with Colonel America, aka Zombie Cap. In a world where an infected sentry brings a zombie plague from beyond the stars, and also where Steve Rogers has achieved the rank of Colonel and the presidency of the United States, America's hero is bidden along with many of the Avengers when they try to contain the sentry situation. The Colonel is even the one to eventually bite Spider-Man on the shoulder when the younger hero tries to help. This zombified version of Steve Rogers retains all of his powers and more, surviving with half of his brain exposed until he was finally defeated by his enemy the Red Skull during a final battle over who gets to devour the corpse of Galactus. Definitely some very, very weird stuff.
Number 3, Venom Hulk. Venom Hulk is as terrifying as you think. It all goes down in What If issue 4. It shows us what would happen if the alien costume had possessed Spider-Man. So if the Fantastic Four hadn't have been able to separate Peter and the suit initially. It's a fun little alternative. It gets pretty ugly quickly and the other Avengers are called upon to try and stop Peter from causing more irreversible damage. Doctor Strange is hurling spells at him for hours, still it's no use. And you'd think when the Hulk came along he could just, huck Peter into a few walls until he calms down. But he arrives and the symbiote seizes power and he's like, that looks pretty good, I want that, give me. And then when it comes into contact with the Hulk, this nightmare is born. When Thor comes in to hopefully try and end this disaster of a situation, he too is consumed by the symbiote. I really hope we get to see some sort of evil version of the Hulk in this What If Disney show. I mean, Venom Hulk would be amazing. I would love to see this issue on TV. Might be a little long shot, but maybe Grey Hulk perhaps, I don't know. Some sort of evil Hulk is coming, I feel it. Number 2, Lizard Hulk. Still green this time around, just a little more wet and scaly. He comes from Earth 19919. Robert Banner, of course, has a similar origin as the Hulk that we're now familiar with, only he was infected by the spider virus in Spider Island issue 1. So a little more this time around. Now he's got extra arms and he's even more powerful. Just what you want. The Spider Queen at this point is standing tall over Manhattan with the residents of New York City turning into spiders, which I gotta say, worst thing I've ever heard. I feel itchy just reading that. And as for our heroes, it's probably best if they switch to a different animal's DNA to avoid the whole mind control Spider Queen awful situation. So Captain America gets a hairy upgrade and the Hulk gets paired with some lizard DNA, resulting in a weird but exciting storyline. Major Godzilla vibes over here.
Coming in at number 10, we have the undead Doctor Strange from the Marvel Zombies universe. While this version of Stephen Strange was able to avoid the initial outbreak of the zombie virus that destroyed their version of Earth, he was eventually tragically bitten and converted into a member of the undead army while defending a dimensional doorway that would have allowed the zombie swarm to invade and infest other realities. The newly zombified Doctor Strange now uses this doorway to peer through the alternate worlds of the Marvel multiverse and find ideal worlds for the zombie invasion to begin anew, making this a very weird but also very dangerous interpretation of Doctor Strange. Coming in at number 9, we have the Soldier Supreme, a very odd combination of Doctor Strange and the Punisher. On an alternate Earth where vampires have killed most of the world's heroes and converted much of the normal population, one of the few vigilantes remaining is Frank Castle. Possessed by the spirit and knowledge of Dr. Stephen Strange as a last-ditch effort to save this reality, the Punisher and the Sorcerer Supreme combined into a single vampire-slaying enemy, turning the Punisher's violent tendencies into the last defense against an unstoppable vampire army. Coming in at number 8, we have the Ultimate Universe version of Doctor Strange, aka Stephen Strange Jr. In the Ultimate Marvel Universe, this version of Doctor Strange that we're introduced to is actually the son of a more traditional interpretation of the character. Following in his father's footsteps, Stephen Strange Jr. eventually becomes the Sorcerer Supreme following his dad's disappearance. But the odd part that gets him on this list is unfortunately his over-the-top and needlessly nasty death. During the Ultimatum event, a highly controversial storyline in which Magneto wiped out millions of lives and resulted in dozens of over-the-top and edgy deaths for many Marvel heroes, Doctor Strange had his head popped like a literal balloon by Dormammu possessing his cloak. Most people dislike this event because of how deliberately edgy it tried to be, and with an anticlimactic death like this, it's really not hard to see why. I mean, his cloak? Really?
Number 7, Ultimate Hulk. This version of Bruce is quite troubled. He was taught to just stay out of his parents' way growing up, and he also hated himself, pretty much. He wanted to be ripped like Captain America, he didn't like his noodle arms, it was a rough go for him in the Ultimate Universe. So when Nick Fury got together the brightest minds to recreate the Super Soldier Serum, Envious Banner was on that team. He did figure it out, or so he thought, but he kept the info to himself. He didn't want any other scientist getting credit. But he took it a little bit too far when he also decided to keep the human testing process to himself as well. He injected himself and became Ultimate Hulk. The first time he changed, he injured Mary and Richard Parker, but down the road he injected himself again, but this time he mixed Super Soldier Serum with Hulk Serum, and then he turned to gray, and his first plan of attack was, of course, as you would think, to fight Freddie Prinze Jr. Yeah. Number 6, Infernal Hulk. First appearing in Deadpool Annual 1, this version picks up after Bruce Banner became the Sorcerer Supreme, and his first trick was to separate the Hulk from himself and just banish him as far away as possible. And what better place to throw him than the pits of hell? While in the land down under, Hulk became Infernal Hulk. A little more scary looking than Joe Fix-It, just a little bit. So when our 616 banner arrived to this universe with Spider-Man, Infernal Hulk traded places in hell with the other Bruce's Hulk persona. So now that Infernal Hulk is free and he's going back after Banner. He's pissed. So Deadpool, Spidey, and Supreme Banner, they all figured, okay, let's just reverse this banishing spell, and then as soon as Banner shows back up, we break his neck. Alright, go team, let's do it. Number 5. Hulk 2099. John Eisenhart this time around made his first appearance in 2099 Unlimited issue 1 back in 1993. This is the future, of course, one of many alternate Marvel futures where heroes are simply no more. But fear not, as we still have cults. Thank God, you gotta have those cults. One cult called the Knights of Banner was piquing the interest of Eisenhart, but at this point, he was this LA movie studio guy and he wanted to make a movie about these knights or this Hulk cult or whatever. They're pretty much us in the future. They worship the Hulk, they have meetings, they talk about him, they probably create top 10 lists, I don't know. But when they turned down the money and said beat it, Eisenhart wasn't happy. So he tricked one of the young members, Gawain, into spilling the beans about the cult and how they're performing illegal gamma experiments. Gawain is actually a reference to Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, an Arthurian story that combined the beheading game and the exchange of winnings. And that's exactly what happened here. John reported this cult and its new secrets, and the police raided and killed everybody. All but Gawain. So John tried to fix what he'd caused, but it was far too late. After a gamma bomb went off, he was turned into the 2099 Hulk. Consumed now with guilt as well, he vowed to protect the young knight, and when Draco killed Gawain, spoilers, he figured he would just defend the people from future threats. Number 4. Compound Hulk. First appearing in Hulk Volume 2, Issue 30, Clue is a smarter version of that Grey Hulk that I mentioned earlier in this list. He's an advanced clone, rather, created by Xemnu. Now, Clue was the result of a cloning gone wrong, classic, and then when Clue and Xemnu were fighting Red Hulk, Impossible Man came in, he was watching the whole thing, and he used his powers to merge both of those guys into the compound Clue. He didn't last long at all, but anytime the words merge and Hulk are in play, it's bound to get weird. Number 3. Steel Corpse. Tony and his suit have always been so close, it's had its back many times, sometimes even acting for itself and making a judgment call. Like in Iron Man 3, it literally woke Tony up from a nightmare aggressively. We love that future tech. But in the Age of X storyline, the suit literally has his back as Tony and the suit begin to merge. Ugh, I'm itchy just reading this. This started right after a virus began taking its toll on Tony. He was rapidly declining health-wise, so he chose a more fitting name, Steel Corpse, to be kind of funny, but also he looks like a corpse, so he's like, nah, I'm just gonna admit it. He, alongside other, much healthier Avengers, were tasked to take down mutants, but when the gang got there, they of course opted to save them instead. Superhero twist of logic, we love it. Only Tony's advanced suit wasn't exactly on board with his new plan, and it started to act out by itself. It still wanted to save the day, although this was not the right way to do it. Captain America had no choice but to end the life of Steel Corpse in order to save the mutants. Number 2. Iron Goblin. Making his first appearance in the Spider Island series, Iron Goblin wasn't made through any reality warping or anything like that. Instead, this happens during the Resistance assault on Spider-Queen, which is sounding crazier than what I just said. Tony Stark ends up getting captured and infected with the spider virus. He's going nuts at this point, so the rest of the heroes try and snap him out of it by using Goblin Formula, which is a solution, I guess. I don't know, read a book, read a comic book, Avengers. Something bad's gonna happen. So he went from being a spider monster to Iron Goblin. Pretty crazy 24 hours for Tony. Tony was still Tony after this point though, despite the evil green look on his face. Like he even said Norman stole his armor before, so he was just evening it out. Haha, he's funny, he's still Tony, nice. But as time went by, every minute that passed, that formula started to in fact change Tony. Like for example, he was flying around on the glider, although he can fly with his suit. It's not looking good. He knew he was going insane, so he sacrificed himself when the Queen's army attacked. Still a hero nonetheless, although he's mean and green and throwing pumpkin bombs. And finally, number 1, Iron Hammer. Coming from Warp World, Iron Hammer, aka Stark Odinson, first came to life in issue 3 of Infinity Wars. So when Gamora had the Infinity Stones, she trapped everybody's soul in the Soul Gem, and then folded the universe in half, which resulted in all of our heroes merging together. Pretty fun. So rightfully referred to as Warp World, we soon get to meet Soldier Supreme, Ghost Panther, Weapon Hex, and Iron Hammer. Stark Odinson in this pocket universe is the son, of course, of Howard Odin, chieftain of Asgard. He has the Iron Hammer armor, and of course he has a massive literal hammer of the gods to get the message across. Being a combination of both, he can face powerful villains like Stain Odinson, who is a blend of Loki and Obadiah Stane, and even Madam Hell. One of the coolest looking versions definitely, and also one of the more powerful. A great note to end on.
Number 10. Deadpool. Deadpool has gone through phases where he was fully cured of his power set and even pretty once more in the comics, like back during Daniel Way's Deadpool run, looking completely normal but without his healing factor. But the most startling shift when it comes to Deadpool's appearance has to be between his on-screen adaptations. That's right, we're talking about the comparison between Deadpool's cinematic debut in the X-Men Origins Wolverine film and his own self-titled film franchise. Although oddly enough, both roles feature him played by Ryan Reynolds. The two adaptations could not be more different. Thankfully in Deadpool 2, Wade manages to fix Cable's temporal dial. Using this device to time travel, Wade is not only able to save Vanessa, who initially died at the beginning of that film, but is also able to clean up the timelines by killing the previous version of himself, who is also known as Weapon 11. It should also be noted that in X-Men Origins Wolverine, Deadpool appeared fully as a villain, as opposed to the lovable mess of an anti-hero we've come to know him as within his own film franchise. Number 9. Raquel. I never know how to say this name, but I'm pretty sure it's like Raquel. How do you say Skrull names? That's the question. For some reason, probably because she had been gone so long, Raquel, aka the Skrull Empress, aka Emperor Doric VIII / Hulkling / Teddy Altman's grandmother, was completely unrecognized when she returned. Raquel was revealed to be alive and well, and also sleuthing it up as she impersonated Tynalt the Pursuer, an elite member of the Kree forces. And apparently Raquel had been impersonating Tynalt so long she had in essence created her persona and basically was her. Raquel had actually been plotting and planning in secret, putting in place all the pieces to bring together the Kree and Skrull Empire, uniting them in an alliance in order to ensure her grandson was the one to rule over the now allied empire, as we saw in Empire. That's the name of the event, so not to be redundant. It was an empire, but it's spelled empire with a Y because it's a whole other thing. And yet when she was revealed in that event to be the one revealed as the Skrull pretending to be Tynalt, many Marvel fans actually needed to crack open their comic history books and review just who exactly she was, with many people mistaking her for Veronki, the Skrull Queen. But yes, this is Raquel. She was believed to have died when the Skrull homeworld perished along with her daughter Princess Enel, as their world was devoured by Galactus. She made her first appearance in the Fantastic Four original series in issue 206 and was believed to have perished in issue 257. But she didn't, she was still alive, and then she came back years later and everyone went, who is that? What? Veronki? What? Not Veronki, two different people. Number 8. Kraven the Hunter. You might think you recognize Kraven, but do you really? After all, the current Kraven that you've seen turning up in the current Beyond storyline of the Amazing Spider-Man series is actually none other than Kraven's last son. Well, his last clone son, anyway. This clone of Kraven was given the name of Last Son after he hunted down all his other brothers, his other clone brothers, who had also been trained by Sergei Kravenov, the Kraven himself. As such, this clone of Kraven was named his true heir, and since then has also taken up the mantle of Kraven the Hunter. So while he may look like Kraven, albeit a younger version of him, this Kraven the Hunter is not actually the original. So I guess this is a character that you would recognize, but in so doing you'd be wrong, which means I guess you didn't really recognize him then, did you? This version of Kraven made his first appearance in the current run of The Amazing Spider-Man, which started in 2018, first appearing back in issue 16 as the Last Son. Number 7. Xemnu. Xemnu made his first appearance in Journey into Mystery in issue number 62. We learned that Xemnu was actually a prisoner and a criminal who was retrieved and accidentally revived by a human and electrician named Joe Harper. Xemnu would go on to become known as Xemnu the Living Hulk, and would also prove to be a powerful cosmic, psionic, and all-around bizarre enemy to the Hulk and the Hulk family in time. Initially, he clashed with the original superhero powerhouse team known as the Defenders. Xemnu in his first appearance has brownish or reddish fur, but currently has reappeared in the comics with white fur, making him look kind of like a space yeti. You may not recognize him because you forgot him, or because he's just so weird, or it could be just because of this change when it comes to, you know, his overall fur color. But yeah, he's got different, I guess he dyed his fur? I don't know. What happened there? Number 6. Norman Osborn. While you might currently recognize Norman Osborn in terms of his appearance, when it comes to his actions and his alignment, You might not. And in modern comics, Norman has also gone through a couple dramatic redesigns and makeovers in recent history. At one point, Norman gets plastic surgery to completely change his facial appearance, reinventing himself as Mason Banks and becoming the head of Alchemax. There's even an unmasked point where we were all kind of like, wait, who's that? And then he's like, I changed my face, but it's me, Norman Osborn, aka also Mason Banks. He also has been the head of Hammer and his own Dark Avengers, and for a time posed as their version of Iron Man, tarnishing the mantle of Iron Patriot. And more recently, a depowered Norman bonded with the Carnage symbiote, allowing himself to use the Goblin Serum once more, but ultimately being driven insane by that whole experience and believing himself to actually be prime Carnage host and serial killer Cletus Cassidy. Now sane again, however, and seemingly purified by the Sin Eater, currently in the comics, Norman is on a path of redemption, having gained a new lease on life and being cured of his usual villainous intentions. Or so it would seem. I never trust Norman, but that's what's up currently. Number 5. Galactus. One villain who recently got a very mummy-inspired looking makeover was Galactus during his time in Thor's latest series as written by Donny Cates. Here in the first arc of the 2020 Thor series, referred to as Volume 6 overall of Thor, Thor takes on the immensely powerful cosmic entity known as the Black Winter. Because the Black Winter is so powerful, Thor is forced to team up with Galactus to defeat it. Unfortunately, he also learns that Galactus is actually kind of a herald for the Black Winter. FYI, that is just how powerful of a force the Black Winter is. He has Galactus as a herald. After devouring 5 planets to bolster his own power, Galactus has this power stripped from him by Thor upon this revelation. Thor leaves Galactus drained of the power cosmic, wrinkled, and de-armored, even taking Galactus's helmet as a trophy, using it as the entrance to his throne room. So while you might have recognized him previously, Galactus then got super upgraded and now is very mummified and also very dead. Oof. Number 4. Onslaught. Onslaught initially was a villain with a mysterious background. Despite the fact the powerful villain looked a ton like Magneto and seemed to pack a psionic powerhouse of abilities that echoed an evil Professor X, the character's true identity as really both of those mutants wouldn't be confirmed till after his initial appearance. When Onslaught appeared again, it was in a similar vein, and while the symbol of Onslaught might be similar, this time around when it came to the character's identity, they were even less recognizable, as it was explained that basically all the mutants of Krakoa were, in a way, Onslaught, and that Onslaught was able to exist through their constant resurrections. So while you might recognize the look of Onslaught when they returned, their true identity was even more of a mystery than the first time around. And their final form that we saw during X-Men The Onslaught Revelation was pretty wild as well, getting a bit of an update to match even the current character designs of what an amalgamated Charles and Eric would look like currently. I like that that version of Onslaught has like the black suit to now the tight black suit that Charles wears. It's a look. Number 3. One Below All. I think one of the biggest revelations of modern comics was learning that even a being as good as the One Above All, who is basically considered to be like Marvel God, has a dark side. The One Below All ended up being a major villain in the Immortal Hulk series, and we'd later learn that their power actually came from one of the most divine and good beings in the Marvel universe, the One Above All. The One Below All is like the Hulk for the One Above All. In other words, their darker and much more destructive other half. So while you might know the One Above All and you might know the One Below All, I bet you'd be surprised to learn that they were actually directly connected to one another. They can't exist without the other, especially given how different in appearance and alignment they both are. But this revelation was also super powerful and fitting for a series that was really all about forgiving and reconciling the darker side of the Hulk, the Hulks, and ultimately of humanity and our own individual selves. After all, we all have like a little bit of a Hulk side to us. Number 2. Killmonger. If you go on far enough back, Eric Killmonger easily becomes one of Marvel's villains you would not soon recognize. And that goes both ways. Whether we're talking about more recent fans looking back in comic history to his first appearance in Jungle Action, volume number 2, or whether we're talking about his initial fans looking at his modern MCU adaptation and comic redesign, which obviously takes inspiration from the MCU version of Eric. Killmonger made his first appearance in the second volume of Jungle Action from the 1970s in issue number 6, and even from that front cover, he just looks like really different. Here, Eric does not sport any self-created bodily scars marking his kills, but instead comes with a lot of spiky accessories, including what appears to be a spike belt, which he uses as a weapon to fight against his foe and his rival, Black Panther. All the spikes. Now he's got scars, but back then he had spikes. Number 1, the leader. I doubt after all this time if the leader even really recognizes himself, considering what he looks like now. Following the events of Immortal Hulk, the leader is left no longer a supervillain, but just a guy. Throughout the course of the series, we saw the leader only grow more evil and more powerful, it seemed. He was eventually basically influenced or possessed by the one below all, the most powerful of all Hulk-related baddies, and possibly the baddest of the bad just in general. However, after the two beings were separated from one another, Stearns was left as just a man, returned to normal. The Hulk decided to forgive the leader, and he returned back to the Earth with all the other Hulks and Bruce Banner. It's been a long time, but Sam Stearns is no longer the leader, at least not currently in the comics. I mean, he could return to being the leader at some point. Instead, Samuel Stearns is just Samuel Stearns. Number 10, Super Skrull. Kl'rt might be recognizable when it comes to his character design, which admittedly has not changed that much over the years, but when it comes to his alignment, you might be somewhat surprised to learn where he is now, from where he started. Super Skrull Kl'rt made his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue 18. Once again, the Skrulls attempted to invade Earth and planned on defeating the FF, this time with their secret weapon, the Super Skrull, who seemed to possess all of the Fantastic Four's powers. Unfortunately, Mr. Fantastic and the team realized that these powers were likely not Super Skrull's own, and suspected in fact that they were delivered to him from the Skrull homeworld. They used a device to jam the signal that was giving Kl'rt his powers, defeating him. Currently in the comics, Kl'rt serves Emperor Hulkling, and was for a time one of his trusted advisors. Kl'rt, however, was also the one who killed Hulkling's foster mother. Recently in Empire Aftermath, Kl'rt felt so awful about his past that he actually offered his life to the Emperor. Hulkling refused to accept it though, instead preferring to make Kl'rt work in the area of diplomacy so that he might make amends for all the lives that he had taken in times of war. He was like, no. Instead, you gotta save lives, and hopefully that'll make up for it. You can't just die on me, Kl'rt. Number 9, Hell's Bells. Hell's Bells was a group of villains who were all female mutants. The team was originally assembled by Cyber, who trained all of its members and consisted of Shrew, Briquette, Flame, Tremolo, and Vague. When Shrew betrayed them by testifying against them in order to get immunity for herself, the Hell's Bells banded together in an attempt to get revenge on her for betraying them. Eventually, they would be successfully taken into custody by X-Factor. Following the events of M-Day and Decimation, all team members save Briquette found themselves completely depowered. They still have operated as criminals in the comics, appearing in the Children of Adam series most recently, but they were a lot less scary because they had to rely on equipment and gadgets in place of, their own powers. Even without their powers, the team mainly stuck together though, minus Briquette and obviously Shrew. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want even more lists about Marvel villains you might not recognize or something in that realm, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Silver Samurai. While Silver Samurai looks much the same in the comics as he always has, not every iteration of him has been so recognizable. We've seen him turn up here and there on Krakoa recently. He seems to enjoy watching and participating in the friendly single combat matches in the Quarry, and in modern comics, he's recognizable. But how about in modern film? Well, Silver Samurai might not be a main character in Fox's mutant universe, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't exist. He actually made an appearance in the 2013 film The Wolverine. But although here he also seemingly looked the same, when it came to his armor at least, he couldn't be further from his comic book counterpart in actuality. That's because Silver Samurai here was an adamantium robot whom Wolverine had to battle against. Yeah, they made Kennyukio Harada robot armor. He was at least piloted by Ikiro Yoshida, who is obviously that film's version of Ken's own father in the comics. So, at least there was a little bit of a thing, but still, he wasn't even a person. He was just robot armor. Like, Rude. Ken is a whole person, okay? It's not just armor. Number 7, Forearm. Forearm is Michael McCain. Originally, Michael was part of Strife's Mutant Liberation Front. He was one of the founding members, but would end up defeated by those that fought against him. Despite generally being on the side of the villains, Forearm was also welcomed onto the mutant island nation of Krakoa, where he could have a fresh start for himself. He accepted the offer and would end up joining Sword and being seen as a member of Magic's Dark Riders, who I think should get their own book. However, on Krakoa, he looks a bit different from his initial appearance, where he decidedly was showing a lot more forearm and had much less shirt. Forearm's mutant power is that he has 4 arms. Get it? Get it? His 4 arms. And now he wears shirts. Good for you, Forearm. Good for you. Although you can also not wear a shirt. You can not wear a shirt if you don't want to wear a shirt. Like, I'm not gonna pressure anyone to wear shirts if they don't want to, or vice versa. I'm not gonna pressure anyone to like not wear a shirt if they're like, I like my shirt, let me keep my shirt. But I do like his new design as well. His new outfit is pretty cool. Number 6, Thanos. Thanos might look very similar to his initial appearance in the comics, and also looks quite similar on the big screen, but he's seen a pretty big change when it comes to what he's up to recently. In the comics, that is. In the MCU, he's mainly dead and gone, but there is a chance perhaps that he could return. Who knows? Not only have we now met Star Fox or Eros in the MCU, but in the comics, Thanos has become the new Prime Eternal, and as such, their new leader. That's right, this guy just went from being the baddest supervillain around to leader of a superhero team. Although we'll have to see where the Eternals' alignment is in the comics following the events of Avengers vs. X-Men vs. Eternals War, because that's probably gonna be crazy. Also, I don't even know what the Eternals is really doing in that mix, but I'm here for it. I'm here to check that out. Number 5, Rhino. Rhino was given a completely new look for his appearance in the second Amazing Spider-Man film. Honestly, Rhino is a hard villain to do in live action, I feel like, so I'm not surprised with the direction that they went with, but also, what a weird direction to go in for that character, considering what they're actually supposed to be like in the comics. In the comics, Rhino is Alexei Sistovich, who is genetically altered and then bonded to a suit of armor that increases his strength and durability. Basically, he's given like a mechanical rhino skin, but like the skin. The armor was modeled after a rhinoceros, as they are known in nature for being relentless when it comes to their assault and extremely hard to defeat due to their tough hide. Rhino, however, has never been known for being very smart, which makes him fairly easy to defeat usually, which seems to be the same idea when it came to his cinematic counterpart. However, the whole design for this character was definitely different than the comic book counterpart, whose armor was much less mech-like or robotic and is more like just the tough hide of a rhino. Really, he kind of just looks like a guy in a rhino suit in the comics. Also, Alexei is just super jacked in the comics, and his cinematic counterpart didn't seem so jacked. He was just like a guy in a suit. Of course, Alexei does get a lot of his jackedness as well from his whole rhino thing, but he also, I think, was jacked still to begin with. I'm pretty sure. He's just more jacked. Number 4, Legion. Legion has a new look in X-Men Onslaught Revelation. This one-shot is kind of like the bookend for the Way of X limited series if you were checking that out, which I personally haven't read all of, but I will say the parts of it that I have read have been strictly excellent, so I would recommend Way of X to anyone that's interested. If you like the idea of pondering the why in life and beliefs, and you enjoy philosophical prose, this is really a great series for you. In Onslaught Revelation, Nightcrawler, Legion, Pixie, and Dust come together to try and defeat the resurrected Onslaught, who has been slowly returning with each resurrection, residing as pieces in the minds of all mutants. In order to help in the fight against Onslaught, Legion makes his mind a safe space for all mutants to come through, in essence also fully connecting with Krakoa and kind of becoming a sort of hive mind if necessary. As such, he gets a redesign, though he still gets to keep the wild shape of his hair that we've all come to recognize so well, and that I've really come to love. Legion, moving forward after the defeat of Onslaught, will also keep this look as he becomes the newly created religion's church. That's right, Legion is the church. He's the building. In essence, people can come into his mind to worship, find community, and seek sanctuary. It's like a nice safe space for people to come and just like be and feel good. It's awesome. I love that Legion is the church. I just think that's great. Number 3, Donald Blake. Donald Blake ended up becoming a villain recently in the comics, which is a pretty big change for a guy who was once also the mighty hero Thor. Donald Blake used to be Thor's human form, but in reality was kind of his own person, or he kind of ended up becoming his own person. He was created by Odin to be a human host for Thor, but after Thor died at the hands of the serpent, Blake became separated from Thor and became his own separate entity. Eventually, he would end up going to the Enchantress for help, only for her to use him to make her own villainous creature referred to as the Keep. Basically, she killed Donald Blake and then used his blood to make the Keep, and we haven't seen the Keep in a while, but I'm sure he's out there somewhere. After Amora and the Keep were defeated by Thor, Blake was laid to rest, living on as a disembodied head in a dream world that was crafted for him. Well, living on as a person in the dream world, but he was just a disembodied head. But he was asleep, so he was dreaming. Eventually, though, Blake came to realize that this world wasn't real, and awoke from his dream, seeking revenge on all Thors across the multiverse for what had happened to him. And don't worry, he wasn't just a head then, he had a body then. He would end up being defeated by 616 Thor in the end, and then made into the God of Lies, as per Thor's brother Loki's suggestion. Thor was like, what do we do with this guy? We shouldn't kill this guy. He's Donald Blake. Loki's like, nah, let's make him the God of Lies. Seems to fit considering everything Donald Blake has been through. Number 2, Taskmaster. Taskmaster is Anthony Masters and is known for being an unstoppable foe. He can master pretty much any skill he can observe. Some would say he's a taskmaster, which makes him a deadly opponent. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we were also introduced to Taskmaster, but the character was changed somewhat for the film in which they were introduced, Black Widow. Instead, Antonia Dreykov, the daughter of General Dreykov, the man behind the Red Room, was Taskmaster. When Black Widow left the Red Room and became an Avenger, she believed she had killed Dreykov, sadly also having to kill his daughter, who basically led them to their target. She was a casualty of the explosion, intended to kill Dreykov himself. Instead, Antonia was actually badly injured and ended up surviving, but her face was permanently scarred. She then became Dreykov's weapon, having studied the moves of the Avengers and having their fighting styles basically uploaded into her brain, allowing her to mimic all their various moves and making her a hard opponent for Black Widow to defeat. Quite different from the comic book version, but still really cool and badass as an alternate version of the character, I think. Number 1, Cyber. Cyber has come a long way when it comes to his look in the comics. Granted, Cyber has also come back a lot of times, so I guess it kind of makes sense that he would look different. He made his first appearance in Marvel Comics Presents in issue 85 in the 90s, where he was introduced to us as a cyborg-appearing Wolverine villain who was hired by General Koi, another enemy of Logan's. Back then, he was just a smile and a coat with a hat on. Currently, however, his design is much different, and he doesn't even go by the name Cyber anymore, instead being known as Hornet in the comics in his newest body. Number 10, Bishop. As some of you pointed out in the comments on the part 1 of this list, a lot of 90s characters, especially 90s X-Men, have completely different looks in the modern day when compared with their 90s appearances. Lucas Bishop is definitely one such character. Although he still has his M tattoo over his eye and a few details in his costume that pay homage to his original look, Bishop has definitely seen some changes, some of which might be so great that fans may not at first recognize him. While he still often is seen with his XSE guns and even still sports a red bandana, Bishop is now a member of the Marauders. Gone are the days of those 90s X-Men colors, and modern day Bishop dresses mainly in reds and blacks, in homage as well to his role as the Hellfire Trading Company's Red Bishop. Also, I love that Bishop is the Red Bishop because he's a bishop and his name's Bishop, it's crazy. Number 9, Crystal. Crystal's initial appearance had her recognizable mainly by her ginger or strawberry blonde hair and a simple white dress. I personally always thought of Crystal as being ginger, but then I see so many different versions of her where she has like maybe blonde hair. So I don't know, but I've always thought of her as a ginger. She is known for being the younger sister of Medusa, who is the Inhuman Queen and true love of Black Bolt. Crystal has had a few different looks, but generally she has longer ginger hair and is either in a yellow suit or a Fantastic Four suit when she was, you know, on that team. She has been known for dating Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, was once married to Quicksilver and had a daughter with him, and she was even for a time married to Ronan the Accuser. Yeah, it's been an interesting dating history, I feel like, for Crystal. All in all, Crystal has had a sort of wild life, and while her costume has changed gradually, comparing her short blonde haired self in her yellow and black diamond suit to her first appearance with long ginger-like hair in her white dress, looks like a dress to me, and you might not know it's Crystal at first glance. And friends, if you want even more lists where we talk about all the glow ups in comics and I guess some of the glow downs, if that's a thing, be sure to let us know that you love this list by giving it a thumbs up. Number 8. Pyro. Pyro might be sporting a very similar suit when it comes to how he looked in his first appearance, but he also now has a skull tattoo. A full face skull tattoo. And honestly, I have come to love it. Not only that, but this version of Pyro was also originally known as a villain, and like many on the island nation of Krakoa, has been given a new lease on life where he no longer needs to be a villain. Instead, recently, Pyro has exclusively acted as a hero, fighting alongside his shipmates and teammates, the Marauders. During his time with the Marauders team, St. John Allardyce ended up taking refuge with his fellow teammates in a tattoo parlor. A few of them decided to get tats while they were there, Pyro included. He decided to get a full face tattoo, getting a black skull tattooed over top his face. And I gotta say, it's just been growing on me more and more every time I read Marauders. At first, after he got this tat, I was expecting, like so many other Krakoans, that Pyro would end up dying and then being resurrected, erasing the tattoo from his face. After all, who needs tattoo removal when you have resurrection protocols, and mutants dying and returning is no longer really a big deal at all. Although I'm sure the Healing Gardens could remove Pyro's tattoo almost as easily. Still, he hasn't gotten it removed or died and been brought back without it yet, so while you might wonder who that is with the skull face tattoo, it seems that it's becoming part of Pyro's modern day look quite seamlessly. So maybe in 10 years from now we'll be like, oh yeah, it's Pyro because the skull face tattoo. Maybe he'll still have it. Number 7. Flash Thompson, or as he's currently known, Agent Anti-Venom. Still, it's pretty wild to think that Flash Thompson, aka Eugene Thompson, started out as Peter Parker's bully back in the day. Flash has come a long way from being an antagonist to a friend of Peter's to a full-on war hero and later superhero. He's battled alcoholism, became an amputee, and even traveled into space where he fought alongside the Guardians of the Galaxy. If you only knew Flash from his first appearance, or vice versa, you only knew him from modern day comics, you'd probably be shocked to see just how different the character is, how far he has come, and how much he has grown and evolved. He even became such a popular character among fans that he got to join the Resurrection Club, being returned to life recently after dying during the fight against Red Goblin. Number 6. Cable. In recent years, Cable has had a completely new look, considering that his old version died and was replaced with his younger version. Of course, his older version has since returned, but there was a good amount of time there in the comics when you might have been confused as to just who exactly you were reading about. Is Kid Cable meant to be Nathan's son, you might have thought, or is he some like de-aged version of Nathan Summers? Well, the latter is the correct assumption if you made it. Young Cable actually hunted his older self down, in essence completing his time loop. But of course, the old man still existed out there, and if you went to the right point and place in time, he would still be living earlier portions of his life. As such, we were able to bring Old Man Cable back in the comics, and young Cable actually realized that he would also have to leave and let the old man basically take over, as while he thought he knew it all, young and all, that's what young people usually think. They think they know it all. It turns out he still has lots to learn. Honestly though, I love both versions of Cable, and I wish that old Cable could team up with his younger self on more occasions. I want like a Kid Cable and Old Man Cable team up comic. Number 5. Speedball, or as he was known for a good amount of time in the comics, Penance. Robert Baldwin initially got his powers after a lab experiment went awry. After being exposed to extra-dimensional radiation, Robbie found that when he was the target of a certain amount of force, his body would transform. Instead of him being harmed from said blow, he would produce a protective barrier, causing him to become basically like a human bouncy ball. He could use this energy to then shield others, blast opponents, or to even halt catapult speeding projectiles in midair. Speedball would later join the New Warriors. However, later on he would be part of an incident at the center of the First Civil War, where 612 civilians were killed, including 60 children. This would prompt him to change in appearance and in mindset, becoming Penance, a spiky armored version of the character who had internal spikes in his suit to remind him of all the victims lost, as he felt personally responsible for their deaths. Speedball has since returned to his original appearance, but it has taken him time to recover both physically and mentally from his time as Penance. And he's kinda still on that road to recovery. He was Penance for a long time. Number 4. Angel. Angel is another mutant superhero who has gone through a ton of different looks in life. Most notably was his shift from having organic wings to techno-organic wings after he lost his organic wings when he became one of Apocalypse's horsemen. The crazy thing is that while Angel seems to appear as mostly his original version, there are times where you might be confused with him as to who is who, as he seems to kind of alternate right now in modern comics between his original form and his techno-organic form, Archangel. As far as I can tell, this hasn't been fully explained yet in the comics, though it has been acknowledged that this happens in a similar manner to his X-Corp partner, Monet. That is, when he gets more emotional or gets more angry, his techno-organic form seems to come out. This was alluded to at the end of issue 2 of X-Corp, their Hellfire Gala issue. And if there have been more explanations on this and I missed them, please feel free to tell me what issues I should in-depth read, because yeah, I feel like there's little details, but we haven't gotten like a full, here's how it is, let me break it down for you. Number 3. Nick Fury. While Nick Fury does look very different in modern day comics in comparison to classic comics, it is important to note that technically these are 2 different characters. Well, technically these are kind of like 3 different characters. Or 4 different characters. There's a lot of characters. The version of Nick Fury we saw in the MCU was actually inspired by the version of the character from the Ultimate Universe, who, fun fact, was also inspired in terms of appearances by Samuel L. Jackson, the very man who would end up playing him. In fact, a lot of the MCU characterization and even stories are inspired by the Ultimate Universe, the alternate reality of 1610, and the stories that went on there. The original Nick Fury of Earth 616 was actually a white man, but he would inevitably be replaced by a 1610 inspired alternate Fury after the original Nick Fury of 616 ended up kind of being transformed into a Watcher. The 1610 version of Fury and Samuel L. Jackson's take on the character would then be adapted for Earth 616, the main comic book continuity, and that's how we would get Nick Fury Jr., who is the son of the original Nick Fury from the comics and looks a lot like Jackson's 1610 inspired version from the MCU. See what I mean? There's lots of Nick Furies. People are like, Nick Fury changed, and I'm like, Nick Fury didn't change, there's just a lot of characters that came together. Number 2. Beast. Beast is one character that has gone through a massive amount of change since we first met Hank McCoy, the lovable vocabularian, scientist, and the X-Men's most bouncy team member, Beast. Back then, Hank was just a relatively large man with enormous feet and enormous hands, but his mutation continued to progress long after that first appearance, changing when he ended up forced to take a serum that he had created based around the hormone that causes mutation. As such, he mutated even farther, which became permanent after he didn't take the antidote quickly enough to thereafter revert the effects. This meant that Hank was now permanently even more muscular, agile, and now completely covered head to toe in gray fur. From there, his fur would become more blue, and over the years his appearance has become borderline lion-like or even kind of cat-like at times. Number 1. Star-Lord. Considering how much Peter Quill has changed with each era of comics, it could be hard for fans to recognize him in modern day. Once again, his appearance and power levels have changed so much. In his initial appearance compared to his modern look, he's basically unrecognizable. And if we go even farther back to the Peter Jason Quill of the 1970s, the Star-Lord of Earth 791 now, he is completely different. It should be noted though that shortly after the main continuity version was introduced in Thanos issue number 8, which came out in 2004, he was shortly after pretty radically changed when he appeared a few years later in Annihilation Conquest from 2007 to 2008, which is pretty much the version of Quill roughly that we have today. although even then, he's still changed quite a bit. Quill more recently in the comics returned from Marinus, an extra-dimensional world where he lived unaging with his friends, partners, and his lovers, Mors and Aradia, for hundreds of years. He came back even more powerful than before he had left, and ended up joining forces once more with the Guardians of the Galaxy to defend the cosmos against the return of the Dark Olympians. Number 10. Storm. Storm has had many different looks throughout the years, and depending on which era of Storm you are most familiar with, you might not recognize her right away when it comes to her appearances in modern day comics. When I think of Storm, one of the most iconic looks I think of is her very different 80s punk rocker look, where she's sporting a bright white mohawk. For me, this look is still one of the first ones that I think of even today. Even if you go back to her first appearance, she looks pretty different in comparison even to the 80s look. The cool thing about the modern day Storm look is that it seems to sort of incorporate all of these looks that have come before, while also being quite unique. It's an homage to the past while not discounting the very real possibility of a grander future. That's actually what I like when it comes to a lot of the X-Men's updated looks. It's all about acknowledging the past while also using said past to fuel and motivate the future. Storm's initial appearance, her 80s look, and of course the now. Number 9. Venom. You wouldn't recognize Venom today compared to his 90s appearance either. For one, Venom initially appeared as a villain and therefore not only looked different but also acted quite differently. And now if we're talking about hosts that we associate with Venom, they're also pretty different in terms of their appearance. Currently, the Venom symbiote is teamed up with Eddie Brock's son, Dylan Brock. Oh yeah, if you've been out of comics for a while, Eddie Brock also has a son now. Dylan is actually Ann and Eddie's son, with a little mix-in of Venom as well, who was also there when he was conceived. And if we're talking about Venom in terms of Eddie Brock, you might not recognize him either. He's aged considerably as a result of him becoming the new King in Black following that King in Black event where Null was defeated and Eddie took his place. That was Venom and Eddie Brock then, and that is who Venom is attached to now, and what Eddie looks like now. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it where we talk about all of the changes in comics, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Echo. Echo is Maya Lopez. When she first appeared, she was a villain who didn't even know that she was a villain in the story. She ended up fighting against Daredevil after being misled and made to believe that he was the one responsible for killing her father. She wasn't really a villain though, she was just like a misguided person. Echo's really, I think, always been a hero deep down. When we first see her, she wears bandages on her arms, possibly an allusion to her one-woman dance show, which is actually based on her life, which was all about how she felt like an Echo. Also, yes, there are many things that Echo is skilled at because her power is like Taskmaster's. She can acquire a physical skill simply by watching it, so she's not just an amazing fighter and martial artist, but she's also a great dancer too. Echo currently in the comics has shown up in the Avengers. She is now the new Phoenix in the comics, having won the opportunity and burden of being bonded with the Phoenix Force during the Phoenix tournament. In fact, Maya in the tournament didn't actually win, but instead was chosen because she had lost the most. The Phoenix Force was looking for a fallen champion apparently, not a big time winner. Echo as the Phoenix looks quite different than her initial appearance, no? I think it's like the Phoenix Flames for me. She still has those bandages though, and she's still got her face paint with her hand. Number 7. Iceman. When Iceman originally came on the scene, he had a very different look. If we go back to his first appearance in X-Men issue number 1, he was actually more like a snowman than an Iceman. Iceman in his early days wasn't quite as frozen solid and was more like an anthropomorphic but faceless snowman in battle. He didn't wear a trademark X-Men uniform, but he did put on his little black booties, which were kind of like, I guess, X-Men trademark uniform booties, because they're black and yellow, and there was a lot of black and yellow coloring with those original uniforms. This meant that Iceman was always the one who had to help Angel get dressed, as Warren had to deal with his wings, both unbinding them and then of course fitting them through his uniform holes, I imagine. We'd later learn in Marvel's Voices Pride from 2021 that Bobby was actually pretty happy to help, as he had a bit of a crush on Warren back in the day. Iceman since then has had a major glow up and appears to look like an ice prince in modern day comics. He even has cool spiky pauldrons. Spiky pauldrons. He's also had a glow up in terms of his powers too. Woo! Woo! Number 6. Hulkling. Hulkling is another hero who looks pretty different from his first appearance. He used to have a bunch of ear piercings, but I guess he can shapeshift, so it was easy for him to close them all up. I guess he was just like, I'm not into it now, and they're gone. Hulkling was much more gruff looking, I'd say, in his first appearance with the Young Avengers. However, he also had the name Hulkling. I mean, he still has that name, but I know that name has nothing to do really with the Hulk, but still, in his original appearance, he's big, he's green, and he's kind of like the Young Avengers' own version of that character, because, you know, everyone's kind of mirroring someone. Though to be fair, Teddy Altman is very much his own character and his own person, like many of the other Young Avengers. Currently in the comics, Hulkling isn't just a hero, but is also the Emperor of the Skrull/Kree Alliance. The Skree Alliance, if you like. And this new role has also dramatically changed his overall outfit and appearance. He looks super cute now. Not that he didn't before, of course. He's just a different kind of cute now than he was before. Also, he has totally different hair. His hair now is blonde. It was black, but also shapeshifter, you know what I mean? Number 5. Dazzler. Alison Blair has had a ton of different looks over the years, and there have been countless points in her history when you may have not recognized her. If you've been invested in modern comics for some time, then Alison's current outfit is Dazzler, which she also sported in Way of X issue number 3, the morning after the Hellfire Gala, will likely be recognizable to you. However, if the last time you saw her was in, her own solo series back in the 80s, then you might be confused as to even who this character is. And if you saw her back in 2015 and were familiar with either the present or past appearances of Dazzler, or if you're familiar with that Dazzler, I really doubt that you would recognize her in the present day. There's many times when you'd be like, who is that, depending on which Dazzler you know. There has been a tendency to try and have Allison change with music trends, instead of keeping her in her somewhat, I guess, outdated disco roots. But personally, I think disco can still be a valid genre today. I still love disco, and I'd love to see her even return to that iconic silver jumpsuit. I like that Dazzler's had so many different looks, that's crazy. Number 4. Professor X. When we think of Professor X, usually a lot of us probably reflect back to his look in the 90s animated series. In fact, many X-Men fans who have seen Professor X recently would probably wonder just who they're even looking at. If you are more familiar with his appearance in the 90s, both in the animated series and in the comics, the modern Professor X might throw you for a loop. Currently, Professor X is able to walk again and happens to be sporting not a suit and, a blanket on his lap, but instead an all-black, skin-tight one-piece. Also, he always wears Cerebro now, obscuring his recognizable face and his bald head. But yeah, that was Professor X then, and this is him now. Number 3. Nature Girl. Nature Girl is amazing. She's one of my favorite of the newer mutants to come out, and recently she has become a lot more metal, both in approach and in her appearance. Nature Girl can basically commune with nature, which often means she can encourage animals to help her, and they actually seem to feel within Nature Girl a kindred spirit. So there's a lot of empathy going on there between both sides. More recently in the X-Men Unlimited Infinity comics, we saw that Nature Girl has been in a constant state of depression and duress, feeling the pain that all nature is currently feeling due to humans polluting and just generally mucking up the planet and its natural and carefully balanced ecosystems. This forced Nature Girl to go on an adventure to fight for what she believes in, which resulted in her kind of accidentally killing someone and then losing all of her hair, just sporting her antlers as she turned to the dark side and took on oiling operations, aiming to destroy them and anyone who wouldn't renounce their loyalty to them. This is not your friendly neighborhood Nature Girl, that's for sure. Nature Girl then, Nature Girl now. I love her new dark look though. I love both versions of Nature Girl. I think Nature Girl's awesome. Number 2. Captain Britain, or more specifically Betsy Braddock. Whether we're looking at things from the point of view as the hero mantle of Captain Britain, or looking at it from the character viewpoint of Betsy Braddock, either way, Betsy is looking pretty different now. For a good amount of time in the comics, Betsy was known for looking just like Quanon, because, well, She was kind of in Kwanen's body, or they were kind of fused together at one point. Fortunately, she has now been restored to her own body, freeing Kwanen and allowing Kwanen to take up the Psylocke mantle. Betsy then went on to become the new Captain Britain in her brother Brian Braddock's place after he was ensorcelled by Morgan Le Fay, becoming her new Dark Knight. It was up to Betsy at that point to take Brian's amulet and become the new Captain Britain until Brian could be saved. Betsy has been shattered and managed to return and is still known as Captain Britain currently, even though Brian also got free, but then Brian was like, you take it, I'm good, I'm gonna do other stuff. You don't have a lot going on right now, Betsy, so take a thing and then make it your own thing. I like it. Number 1. Captain Kate. Even Kitty Pryde's name has shifted somewhat. She's been known by a few different names in the comics: Shadowcat, Sprite, Kitty Pryde. Now, however, she prefers if you just call her Kate. Captain Kate is the Red Queen of the Hellfire Trading Company, and typically dresses in red as such. But not only that, she also typically dresses kind of piratey now. I personally love it. This is because Kate is now also the leader of the Marauders, who have reclaimed this one villainous name and are basically a pirate crew who sail the seas, bringing those mutants to Krakoa who want to be there, but who for one reason or another can't get there. They also help deliver and intercept shipments of goods as necessary. So the whole look really fits with what Kate is up to currently in the comics, but it is very different from her original or even her past looks. Kate before, Kate now. Although I will say that original outfit that she's wearing with like the red vest and like the stripy shirt, I was like, is there already like pirate vibes that were kind of carried over here? I don't know.
Coming in at number 10, we have Namor the Submariner. Now, if you just look at his record on paper, Namor has a pretty villainous track record. A half mutant and half Atlantean warrior, he's constantly fighting the Fantastic Four, frequently fighting the Avengers, and has occasionally kidnapped the Invisible Woman at least once or twice. However, as leader of the Atlantean people, many of these conflicts only came about as Namor sought to do what was best for his followers and countrymen, and has in recent years become an ally to the Avengers, the Defenders, the Illuminati, and many other superhero groups. Just as long as you don't do anything to harm Atlantis, Namor can be an incredibly useful and powerful friend to have in your corner. At number 9, we have the beloved vampire killer known as Blade. Born as a human-vampire hybrid named Eric Brooks, Blade has all of the powers of a Marvel Universe vampire with nearly none of the negative side effects. He possesses superhuman strength and speed, with all of his senses heightened to make him a perfect predator while being immune to damage from sunlight, silver, or holy artifacts that would instantly turn a regular vampire powerless. While he does still need the nutrients from fresh human blood to prevent himself from losing control of his hunger, Blade often uses a special serum as opposed to actually draining any humans. With so many strengths and so little weaknesses, Blade is definitely a blood-sucking force to be reckoned with. Coming in at number 8, we have Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. Now, the Punisher obviously fits the bill as an anti-hero, but is he really one of the most powerful? Well, despite his lack of actual superhuman abilities, the Punisher is considered to be at the absolute peak of non-enhanced human performance, with a long military history and years of physical combat training. However, the truly most terrifying thing about the Punisher is his dedication to his cause. While other heroes may shy away from violence and especially murder, the Punisher has no such qualms. And the fear that the Marvel Universe's villains feel towards a hero that's willing to get as dirty as they are, that's some pretty intense stuff and definitely deserving of a spot on this list. At number 7, we have Johnny Blaze, aka the Fiery Ghost Rider. After Johnny made a deal with the villain Mephisto, a demon that just loves to try and steal the souls and happiness of various superheroes for some reason, he became the Ghost Rider, capable of combining his form with that of a spirit of vengeance known as Zarathos. Completely immune to any sort of physical attack unless it was made by a weapon of angelic origin, Johnny is able to manipulate and control Hellfire, one of the most dangerous substances in the entire Marvel Universe that burns not only physical objects, but the soul or essence of them as well. While he's veered towards the dark side with his hellish abilities several times over the years, Johnny overall strives towards redemption and using his demonic powers for something at least slightly close to good. Coming in at number 6, we're gonna have to go with the famous, or should I say, infamous Deadpool. Originally a villain for the X-Force, Deadpool has over the years turned into a charming and fourth wall breaking anti-hero that's always trying to do some form of good, but sometimes shows it in some pretty odd and violent ways. However, the most notable aspect of Deadpool's powers and what makes him so powerful is his sheer inability to die. No matter how many times you stab him, shoot him, or chop some bits off, Deadpool will always bounce back with at least a couple of bad jokes. Add in his not insignificant skill with all manner of firearms and weaponry, and you've got an explosive anti-hero that you wouldn't want to mess with. Coming in at number 5, we've got Loki. And while he may not be the Crown Prince of Asgard, he's definitely the Crown Prince of changing allegiances. While Loki's motivations and goals have changed frequently over his vast history, with the only consistent characterization being that of a wild card, his strength and the level of his powers has maintained a particularly high quality. Combining the strengths of both his frost giant genetics and his Asgardian upbringing, Loki would be formidable even without his mastery of magic and deception, showing that power isn't just about lifting heavy things or swinging a magical hammer, but can be just as effective scheming behind the scenes. Plus, you know, being as handsome as Tom Hiddleston probably doesn't hurt. Coming in at number 4 is the underrated hero, the Sentry, an expert on being torn between good and evil. While I've spoken before on this channel about the Sentry being one of the most physically powerful beings in the entire Marvel multiverse, the most interesting aspect of his powers is his manifestation of the Void, an equally powerful dark version of his Power of a Million Suns based abilities. With the Void and the Sentry actually being two halves of the same person, and their internal struggle being so devastating as to put the entire world at risk, the Sentry has actually had the world's memory of him wiped on several occasions, just to prevent the Void's powers from being abused. At number 3, we have the Scarlet Witch, also known as Wanda Maximoff. Originally believing herself to be the mutant daughter of Magneto, Wanda is in reality one of the most powerful magic wielders in the Marvel multiverse, and a conduit for chaos magic that allows her to rewrite reality to her will. While Wanda may have been one of the most notable Avengers for a time, she's also struggled with her powers during events that wiped mutants off the face of the earth and brought her own children into existence through willpower alone. No matter what reality-changing adventures she's caught up in, Wanda Maximoff will always be one of the most powerful beings in the entire Marvel Universe. Coming in at number 2, we've got the character that personally first pops up when I think of the word anti-hero, with the iconic Venom. From Spider-Man's edgier looking costume to a bulky web-slinging supervillain to the lethal protector of San Francisco, Venom has held more jobs over the years than I have, which is honestly saying a lot. But with the recent defeat of the dark symbiote god known as Null, Venom has become the leader of the symbiotes, and thus has one of the most unstoppable armies in the entire Marvel multiverse at his beck and call. Let's hope that Venom keeps on leaning on the hero part of anti-hero, because otherwise, this guy would be a serious problem for the rest of the universe. And finally, coming in at the number 1 spot, we have the leader of the Brotherhood of Mutants and the master of magnetism, Magneto. While some may know him as the most notable villain the X-Men have ever faced, labeling Magneto as solely a villain is simplifying his tragic story far too much. Having rejoined with Professor X in recent years and been a major contributor to the new mutant home island of Krakoa, Magneto's dedication to the mutant race is only dwarfed by the powers he possesses. Capable of altering the very magnetic fields that hold the universe together, Magneto's abilities go far beyond the he can control metal simplification that his name seems to suggest. Magneto was recently able to help terraform the entire planet of Mars, and the version of him from the Mars Marvel Ultimate Universe was even able to nearly single-handedly wipe out humanity himself just by reversing the planet's polarity. AKA, he's definitely more powerful than something you'd usually associate with sticking to your refrigerator.
Number 10. Strife. Strife is a pretty weird dude, especially as he's the exact staple of an evil clone. You know when people tell you they have an evil clone and it wasn't them, but often in stories no one believes them? This is actually what Strife is for Cable. Deadpool actually tried using that line once, and in fact it was actually true at the time, and people didn't believe him either. Don't worry, Cable. Strife has been mistaken for Cable on multiple occasions. When Strife shot Professor X, everyone wrongly thought that it was Cable, not yet knowing that Cable had an evil clone. Strife has also attempted to impersonate Cable before, trying to act as Hope's father during the events of Messiah War. All in all, Strife is kinda just an evil weirdo who also happens to be a lot more powerful than Cable, as he doesn't suffer from the techno-organic virus like the original Nathan Christopher Summers does. Strife is also the son of Apocalypse, which of course instantly makes him pretty weird and pretty evil. Number 9. Joseph. Joseph is the younger mutant clone of former villain and current anti-hero Magneto, who is also known for being one of the most powerful mutants besides. Joseph initially started out as an anti-hero himself. He was created by Astra, who was actually retconned to be Magneto's first recruit for his Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Astra hoped the clone would be able to kill Magneto, but her plan failed, and Joseph ended up lost and without his memories. Unable to remember who he was, those who took him in believed him to be an amnesiac Magneto, despite the fact that he seemed much younger than the villain. Initially, Joseph sacrificed himself to save the world from Magneto, but he would later be brought back by Astra, only to become a villain and a new leader of his own Brotherhood. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and like I said you want more clones, you know what to do. Hit that like button, comment down below, and why not share for your friends that also love clones. Number 8. Mr. Sinister's Chimera. Granted, this at least wasn't as weird as I thought it could be. I was expecting it to get a lot weirder. Still, this clone was startling enough that the Hellions, specifically Empath, were forced to take it down. As was alluded to in Incoming, Sinister was hellbent on creating a super powerful mutant that would be a Chimera, a blend of multiple genes. Even though he was technically sworn as a member of the Quiet Council and in general as a citizen of Krakoa to perform no more cloning. But you know Nathaniel Essex, Sinister's got a clone. Hence, in the Hellions issue number 15, we finally got to meet Mr. Sinister's newest creation and his pride and joy. This Chimera was a blend of Sinister and his Iraqi rival Tarn the Uncaring, which I gotta say is a pretty weird yet epically powerful combo, making his Chimera one of the most powerful mutants out there and an Omega level mutant clone. Number 7. Kane Parker. Kane was a defective clone of Peter Parker, one of the multiple created by the villain Jackal. Kane, unlike clone Ben Reilly though, was seen as being more villainous, or at least more questionable when it came to his methods. Kane has always been known for having less of a moral compass and is also often associated with a more moody look with his long flowing locks. His signature ability is the Mark of Kane, which is actually the same ability that allows Spider-Man to wall crawl. For Kane though, the little spider-like hooks on his hands are more abrasive, which means that he can actually lay his hands on someone and use them to burn his victims. It's like the opposite of laying hands in D&D. Number 6. Linda the Duck. You guessed right, even Howard the Duck has a clone in the Marvel Universe. Linda the Duck was actually created along with another character's female version. The Collector is the one responsible for her creation, apparently making her for reproductive and potentially breeding purposes. That's a whole can of worms that I really don't want to open up on the internet, but I suppose you could if you so chose. Linda would end up escaping the Collector and traveling back in time to before she ever existed or before she ever escaped, meaning that no one was looking for her at that time, so she could live her life safely. A pretty smart plan for staying hidden and operating under the radar. Number 5. Shocket Raccoon. Somehow Linda's partner in crime, Shocket Raccoon, is an even more surprising clone to me. Shocket Raccoon is, you guessed it, the female clone version of Rocket Raccoon. She was also created for reproductive, potentially breeding purposes. Shocket, along with Linda, also escaped the Collector's collection after being made by Tanelier Tavon. However, it was only due to assistance from the Gatherer D3X that they even got out at all. Gatherer D3X was instructed to put them back into cryogenic stasis, but actually rebelled against his master and decided to escape alongside Shocket and Linda. Sadly, it wouldn't work out too well for him in the end, but Shocket and Linda are still probably good. They might be in another universe though now. Number 4. Kindred. In a masterful turn of events, it was revealed that Kindred's true identity was actually more complicated than just being Harry Osborn. Instead, Kindred was really two different people, Gabriel and Sarah Stacy, the illegitimate children of Norman Osborn and Gwen Stacy. Dun dun dun! But there was even an added twist on that reveal. I know, how shocking. Gabriel and Sarah, it turns out, were actually creations of Harry Osborn. He combined his father and Gwen's DNA to make the two clones and implanted memories in Mary Jane Watson's and Norman Osborn's minds to make them think that the twins were really Norman and Gwen's biological offspring, making them think that Norman had slept with Gwen and that she had given birth to the twins secretly in France. However, this was not at all true, it turns out, and the twins were actually just created by Harry to torment both his father and his old friend, Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. Old friend slash rival. That's right, they retconned the retcon and I am so happy about it. These clones might be weird and ultimately degenerate pretty quick, but I'm really happy that they are weird clones and that the relationship between Norman and Gwen was simply an illusion. Thank you Mysterio, thank you Harry, thank you Nick Spencer. Number 3. Harry Osborn. And surprisingly, Kindred wasn't even the weirdest clone for me, involved in the most recent Spider-Man plot, which wraps up Nick Spencer's run on The Amazing Spider-Man. Harry Osborn also ends up having a clone, and it's revealed that the version of him that was locked up this whole time is the real Harry. Not the real Harry really, but a clone. We'll get to that in a minute. The Harry that we thought was Kindred was actually Gabriel and Sarah using chameleon disguise tech to impersonate Harry. However, it turns out this actual Harry isn't, well, actually Harry, who remains dead in the comics. He's actually a clone who was created by Norman after the death of his son, which it turns out he just couldn't live with. He made it appear as though Harry had actually survived due to him being exposed to the Goblin Serum. In the end, Harry realizes that he's a clone, coming to terms with the fact that he was the one behind the plot to create Gabriel and Sarah in order to hurt both Norman and Peter. He chooses to make amends and ultimately sacrifices himself, but in the end, at least he gets closure for doing so, finally able to confess his misdeeds and redeem himself once and for all. Bye, Harry clone. You will be missed. Number 2. Captain Zolandia. Captain Zolandia is the really messed up mutated clone of Steve Rogers, and he's not the only mutated clone that Arnim Zola goes on to create in Dimension Z, or Dimension Z depending on where you're watching. He claims to have all the memories of Captain America, and while beating him up uses these memories to torment Steve, trying to plant seeds of self-doubt in regards to Rogers' heroic beliefs and mission. Captain Zolandia would also go on to become the leader of the Unvengers team as well, which is a team that also features other messed up clones of other main Avengers team members. Look under your seat! Everyone gets a mutated clone. You get one, and you, and you! Mutated clones for everybody. Number 1. Ian Rogers. Ian is a clone of both Arnim Zola and Steve Rogers. He's like Captain Zola's clone baby, I guess. He was initially created by Arnim Zola in Dimension Z, which is where Cap found the test tube baby and rescued him. Cap would spend years trapped in that dimension with Ian and would kind of raise him as his own son. However, Ian would be kidnapped by Zola and ultimately brainwashed against Cap. Oh no! Cap would then have to help dismantle this brainwashing to free Ian once more from Zola's grasp and his influence. And really, everything involving Ian gets even weirder from there. He would eventually go on to take up the name Nomad and for a time would become the ally and partner of Sam Wilson's Captain America. Number 10. Punisher 2099. Punisher 2099 is Jacob Gallows. He hails from the alternate dystopian future of Earth 928, where mega corporations pretty much own and run everything on planet Earth. Jacob himself is a police officer working for the Public Eye, a privatized police force owned and operated by Alchemax. After suffering an injustice with his brother, sister-in-law, and mother being killed after a hit was put on them by Kron Stone, the son of Alchemax's CEO, Jake decided to take matters into his own hands. Finding the war journal of the Punisher of years before, he was inspired to become a vigilante all his own, and ended up carrying on Frank Castle's work and title, but with the aid of future technology and tracking. Punisher 2099 would eventually end up with a bionic arm, which also made him an even better fighter than he was previously, boosting his skills. Number 9. Deathlock Prime. There have been a few different versions of Deathlock that we've seen throughout the years. All of them have been pretty futuristic in the sense that they are cyborgs, who also generally come equipped with advanced weaponry. But at least one Deathlock is actually also hailed from the future. The one I'm talking about here is Deathlock Prime, who came from the alternate future of Earth 10511, a reality where Roxxon, typically the corporation behind the creation of Deathlocks in most series, have taken over the entire planet Earth. Deathlocks were employed in this future in a sort of Terminator-esque Skynet way to squash the resistance by traveling back in time and killing the enemies of Roxxon to prevent any of them from rising up in the future. Gotta love that Skynet ploy. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn more about future superheroes, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Iron Lad. Iron Lad is a hard one to rank because he's actually a Mortis and therefore also Kang the Conqueror, two very powerful villains in the Marvel Universe who often are known for traveling through time and assuming new identities throughout the years. However, because many of his other identities are considered villainous, we're going to actually rank Iron Lad based on what he was capable of more as Iron Lad, which is why he's a little lower on our list in comparison to if I was ranking him as, Kang. Iron Lad was one of the original members of the Young Avengers, but later learned that he was destined to become the villain known as Kang over time, as he continued to try and set up his future to be perfect. Iron Lad, aka Nathaniel Richards, rebelled against his future self, however, killing Kang and attempting to alter his own future. However, Iron Lad's fate was not so easy to beat, and he would eventually end up working with and becoming his future villainous selves. Selves. There's multiple of them. Selves. Number 7. Captain America 3099. Captain America 3099 is one of the uniforms you can get in Marvel Future Fight, a mobile dungeon crawler style action RPG game set in the Marvel Universe. While we've been to 2099 in the comics, 3099 offers an even more futuristic look at some of our favorite heroes. Cap's 3099 uniform includes a digital, still physical, but appearing kinda holographic, if that makes sense, shield. Cap also sports some interesting pieces of armor, including boots, a chest plate, and pauldrons that also look super futuristic with highlights of glowing neon blue light inlaid into them. This uniform showed up earlier last year and can be unlocked by playing through story mode for the 3rd time. I believe. I think you can still unlock it that way. Number 6. Spider-Man 2099. Spider-Man 2099 is Miguel O'Hara. He hails from the alternate reality belonging to 2099, or really one of the 2099 realities really, Earth 928. In 2099, Miguel becomes Spider-Man as a result of an experimental drug he was pressured to work on as a brilliant geneticist employed by Alchemax. The has so far killed a man who he tested it on, which is why Miguel actually tries to leave, but Miguel was forced to try it himself after trying to leave the company, only for his boss to sneak a highly addictive hallucinogenic into his drink that only Alchemax made. Miguel miraculously survived the transformative process, despite the experiment being additionally sabotaged in an attempt to kill him. In the end, Miguel was left with a power set similar to the Spider-Man of the past and ended up becoming the Spider-Man of the future. Since his introduction, Miguel O'Hara has become a huge fan favorite and has even made his way over to Earth 616 for a few team-ups with main continuity Spider-Man Peter Parker. Number 5. Bishop. Bishop is a mutant from an alternate dystopian future, which is kind of a thing with mutants, if you haven't already noticed that before. There are a lot of mutants who come from the future, specifically various different dystopian futures. Lucas Bishop in his future was a mutant who joined up with the XSE in his timeline, known as the Xavier Security Enforcers. Bishop's powers allow him to absorb almost any type of energy, including kinetic energy, even energy from a snowfall, store up said energy, and disperse it, using it to boost or heal himself or to fire concussive blasts at his opponents. Number 4. Allfather Doom. In the year 2099, Dr. Doom becomes a hero. There were actually 2 Dooms who appeared, and initially it seemed like the Victor Von Doom that we'd come to know may not actually be the true Doom. After all, he was younger and unscarred at his first appearance. However, this would actually be explained in time, and it would be revealed that the other, more villainous Doom was a brainwashed imposter, Eric Zerny, in truth. In fact, there weren't even just 2 Dooms. There were kind of 3 if you're counting Tiger Wilde, a cyborg who became dictator of Latveria. He didn't necessarily go by the name Dr. Doom, but definitely had a kind of Doom vibe going on with his metal cyborg self and being a tyrannical ruler of Latveria. The real Doom ended up being the last one standing in the end and used his power for good. True, he does set out to conquer the United States, but this is actually a good thing as he aims to do so for heroic reasons, wanting to take down the mega corporations who basically now control all aspects of the nation and its civilians' lives in the future. He even brings back S.H.I.E.L.D., which is pretty good, I think. Number 3. Cable. Probably one of the most powerful superheroes out there, period, is Cable. Cable is little baby Nathaniel Christopher Charles Summers, initially referred to as Baby Christopher in the comics, all grown up. Cable actually goes to the future and then comes back to the past after having a roller coaster of a life. He is the biological son of Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, and Madeline Pryor, aka the Goblin Queen, and also Jean Grey's clone. Jean herself is also a mother to Cable, thinking of him as her own son and having memories implanted in her mind of his childhood. So to Jean, she also is his mom, and to Cable, Jean is also his mom too. Being the child of such powerful mutants means that Cable himself is an immensely powerful telepath and telekinetic, despite the fact that he has to focus a lot of his mental strength on fending off the techno-organic virus, which he was infected with. He's also an immensely skilled combatant capable of time travel. Number 2. Cosmic Ghost Rider. Cosmic Ghost Rider comes to us from a very bleak future where Thanos ends up winning the day. So many bleak futures in Marvel. And I mean Thanos really wins the day, by the way, like in an awful way. Cosmic Ghost Rider was once Frank Castle, who ended up becoming a spirit of vengeance but returned to Earth too late, after everyone was dead and there was basically nothing left to avenge. Driven insane by years of loneliness, he ended up becoming a Herald of Galactus and being granted the power Cosmic in a final bid to try and defeat Thanos. When this failed, he joined the Tyrant himself and became his own Herald, cause I mean what else are you gonna do? However, this reality was wiped from existence when a past version of Thanos met his older self who had destroyed almost everything in the galaxy at that point, King Thanos. Younger Thanos found him pretty pathetic and vowed to never become him, returning home and causing King Thanos' reality to crumble, and King Thanos to never have existed. However, Cosmic Ghost Rider would be given a place in Valhalla, and from there be given the chance to return to the world of the living by Odin himself, who sensed that he was unhappy in Valhalla. Cosmic Ghost Rider is not only super powerful at this point, but has also been around since the beginning of Marvel continuity now, having tons of knowledge about the universe as he ultimately decided to sit back and watch it all unfold, knowing that avoiding its demise was pretty much inevitable, because he already tried that. Number 1. Prestige. When it comes to Jean Grey and Cyclops, they really have more alternate or future kids than they do main continuity ones. Rachel Summers, aka Prestige, being no exception here. She hails from the alternate dystopian future belonging to Earth 811, where she is the daughter of her own reality's version of Jean and Scott. Although oddly enough, on Earth 616, she does pretty much also think of the main continuity versions of her parents as her true parents as well, which I guess in a way they sort of are, it's just they didn't end up going down the path that leads to Earth 811. Earth 811 is the Days of Future Past reality to give you an idea of just how dystopian we're talking about here. Rachel is even more powerful than her brother from a different reality, Cable. She also has been a host for the Phoenix Force and has better control and use of her abilities and powers. She also doesn't have the techno-organic virus distracting her and eating away at some of her power, meaning that she operates almost always at full power levels, which is pretty intense because Rachel's really powerful. Also, I dare everyone to go back and now count how many times I said dystopian future in this video. I feel like I said that a lot.
Coming in number 10, we've got Wasp. Janet Van Dyne, synonymous with stinging insects across the world. She's also known for infecting important individuals and wreaking plenty of havoc. We're not really sure how or when she got infected, but that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. On Earth 2149, the zombie plague spread quickly, and she had a lot to do with it. Hero zombification doesn't turn the supers into shambling, brainless creatures like so many other apocalypses do. It instills them with a thirst for blood, a hunger for flesh, and the ability to create even more zombies. So of course, Wasp went to find her husband, Henry Pym, aka Giant Man. We'll come back to that in a bit. After infecting Pym, they got right down to business. She called a false Avengers Assemble and picked off the folks who ended up showing up, eventually discovering that Pym was hiding T'Challa from her. Overcome by zombie hunger, she attacked Pym but was decapitated. Still alive, mind you, but without a body to call her own. So for a while, Wasp remained just a head, traveling through the universe in what can simply be called a jar. Eventually, she managed to procure a cybernetic body for her zombie dome. Absolutely wild. Coming in number 9, we've got Red Skull. A big part of one of the zombie stories was the fight against and then upon Galactus. Like, usually his appearance would be an enormous one, with all sorts of supers having to put it all on the line to put an end to his plans. In Zombies though, Galactus falls to the undead heroes and villains rather quickly. Using a crazy gun that shot beams of pure concentrated energy, Galactus was cut down promptly. This wasn't the end of it though, as hero and villain zombies descended upon the enormous corpse to feed. These two groups fought it out to earn the meal, which brought Captain, or Colonel in this case, America and Red Skull face to face. Enemies even in the undead afterlife, eh? Usually one would expect the patriotic pummeler to win this kind of fight, but in Zombies, Red Skull scoops out his foe's brain. That's it for America. Coming in number 8, we've got Wolverine. After fighting the good fight when the zombies showed up, eventually Wolverine fell and got turned into a zombie himself. Ouch. Keeping all of his classic powers but earning a brand new hunger, he's a force to be reckoned with. He plows through countless deadites with ease and then scares the Necronomicon until it begs not to be eaten. Wolverine doesn't eat books, but he does use them for TP. Oh boy. That's just the beginning of Wolverine's zombified adventure though. He sniffs out a bunch of survivors and brings a bunch of zombies together to fight Magneto. Interestingly enough, he tries to fight Silver Surfer after this, but his necrotized flesh can't hold his claws when he strikes. This doesn't make him useless though, as he still is able to literally toss Iron Man into the fight. In fact, Wolverine is still powerful enough as an undead corpse to kill Juggernaut, among other classic characters. Then he and some other zombies head to space, thinking they've already eaten all of the unsullied flesh on Earth. Coming in number 7, we've got Reed Richards. This is a universe-spanning tale of tragedy if there ever has been one. Poor Reed. He watched his children get annihilated by zombie She-Hulk and lost his mind completely. Even before he's zombified, he dives deep down the zombie rabbit hole, learning about how they function, how efficient they can be, and more. This disturbs those around him, who are shocked at how interested he is in the creatures that kill his family. In the end, he infects the remaining members of the Fantastic Four without their knowledge, and they all turn right in front of him. Then they turn him, and the zombie Fantastic Four is ready to roll. Imagine having the power to keep people alive, but instead using the research to turn your friends into zombies. The people who trusted you! Insane. Worse still, the zombie foursome finds Tony Stark and turn him into a zombie before he can get his suit on, and that opens up a whole new can of worms. Coming in number 6, we've got Captain Marvel. Carol Danvers. As if she couldn't stir up enough controversy by starring in her own movie a few years back, we've also got her piloting a long-dead Galactus towards Earth in Zombies Respawn. Folks know she's bad news as soon as they see her, as an unzombified Wolverine tells his whole squad to fall back. Too late though, as she is ready to bring the zombie apocalypse to Earth once more. All of her powers are essentially the same as they've ever been, but her mission has changed. Consume the planet many had assumed she swore to protect. Bad news all around for sure. Coming in number 5, we've got Mystique. Now this is some next level zombie intelligence right here. Mystique is known for using her shape-shifting abilities to mess things up across the board for sure, but what about when she essentially ends the world with one simple trick? Doctors hate her, that's for sure. She takes on the form of Scarlet Witch, chills with Wanda's brother Quicksilver, and turns the speedster into a zombie. Then Quicksilver decides it's a fine idea to zip all over the world at max speed, turning every other available person. That is beyond the butterfly effect. That's like the butterfly sanctuary full of freshly metamorphosed creatures effect. Coming in number 4, we've got Quicksilver. Like I just explained, this super fast freak gets turned and makes the zombie infection a global pandemic before anybody can do anything about it. You think we've witnessed the quick spread of a virus recently? Think again. Sure, planes, trains, and automobiles will eventually get the job done, but Pietro here makes it happen in seconds flat. That's gotta be a record or something. So in terms of people with the highest rate of turning others into zombies, it seems that Quicksilver ran away with the competition. Easy peasy, right? Coming in number 3, we've got Hank Pym. We mentioned him earlier in the list when discussing the deeds of his wife, but Giant Man got up to some heinous stuff while operating as a zombie. The zombies are so good at eating and infecting that they soon ruin their food supply. Some suggest exploring the universe to find other new sources of nourishment, others claim that they should be able to eat each other. That second idea falls on its face though when zombies realize that zombie meat tastes bad. However, there are plenty of fine, enterprising minds in the Marvel universe. Hank Pym is just one of those geniuses, and he comes up with a plan. Breeding and cloning humans to come up with an infinite supply of food. How wonderful. Just like factory farms, but for people. I can only imagine what kind of awful, cruel things would happen in such a facility, but here we are. It never really works out, thankfully, but still. Pym also captures and restrains T'Challa at one point, saving him for when he gets really hungry. He won't turn if all Pym does is hack off a limb or two. Coming in number 2, we've got Spider-Man. Here's a hard one to handle. Peter Parker turning into a zombie and giving up on all of the goodness in his heart. Sheesh. A lot of folks were really freaked out by the actions Spider-Man took once zombified. Like, eating the flesh of fellow heroes is a tough start, but Peter even went home and feasted on Mary Jane and Aunt May. Not cool, Peter. After one hell of a feeding frenzy on Earth, Spidey and a bunch of other heroes take to the stars, looking for more flesh to consume. This eventually results in them eating most of the food in the known universe. Is a New York slice not enough anymore? Absolutely gutted at what he's done, Spider-Man isn't exactly sure what to do. He's out here shooting webs made of veins and arteries, hungering after an infinite source of food that no longer exists. Even when he's fired into a new universe, he can't control himself. After all he's learned, that zombie virus just takes over. Sheesh. And finally at number 1, we've got the Hulk. Bruce Banner and his big green pal tend to be pretty scary on a regular day, but when zombie viruses show up, things can get really raunchy. Usually Banner finds a way to reel in his alter ego and remain pretty affable, but not Zombie Hulk. He is a crazed, destructive lunatic with nothing to lose. He'll kill and eat and kill and eat and kill and eat until there is nothing left, which is exactly what he does. The zombification does nothing to rob him of his strength either. Hell, when Thanos accuses him of being the reason every zombie is so ticked off and hungry in deep space, Zombie Hulk just destroys his head. Insane. I didn't even mention what he did to Silver Surfer's head. This is a green undead freak that you do not want to cross at all. Zombie superheroes might not be the most long-lasting and legendary iterations, but they're a whole lot of fun. And I'm sure that this upcoming What If series will touch on them at some point.